Okay, and with that, we'll get started. Hello and welcome to the April 4th, 2024 meeting of the Humboldt County Planning Commission. I'm Chair Noah Levy. Thanks for joining us tonight. As always, I just want to start by pointing out the ways that you can watch or participate in this meeting remotely. If you are at a computer and you wish to participate in the meeting, make comments, then the best way to do that is through Zoom. The link to that Zoom meeting is at the top of page 2 of our agenda. You can also participate by phone. However, if you are watching on the humboldt.legistar.com live feed, just note that that feed is actually 30 seconds or a minute behind live. So if you're watching with the anticipation of calling to comment, make sure you do so a little earlier than you might otherwise think you need to. And with that, I will call the meeting to order and invite you to join me in a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tripp, thanks for filling in tonight for Laura. Could you take a roll call of commissioners present, please?
Absolutely. Ivor Skavdal,
Here.
Noah Levy,
Here.
Thomas Mulder,
Here.
Peggy O'Neill,
Here.
Sarah West,
Present.
Jerome Grazi,
Here.
and Lorna McFarland.
Here.
Okay, we have 7 out of 7, full quorum. Before we get to agenda modifications or consents, we have on the agenda the chair and vice chair nomination and election. As I said last time, it's not written into our rules, but I personally believe it would be a good thing to rotate the chair and vice chair positions a little bit more frequently than has happened in my time on the commission. And I've been glad to fill this role for the last year and a half, but I would be really happy to pass it on to somebody else. And I think we have some capable members of this commission who could fill that role. Commissioner West.
Were you saying last time that there was a tradition as to kind of the passing of the role to?
Yeah, thank you for yes, I did say that because again, it's just unwritten tradition, but I believe since in my 10 years on the commission, the chair had been filled by the person who'd been on the longest. And when Chair Bob Morris stepped down, Alan Bongio was that person. He took it up for a while. I became the vice chair. When Alan stepped down from the role, I became the chair, and Brian became the vice chair because he had been serving next longest. But Brian is no longer with us. If we were to follow that tradition, Commissioner O'Neill would be the longest next serving, but I'll let her answer the question, but I think she said last time that that's not a role she wants to take up.
Or the vice chair. And you've done a great job. I'd like to see you continue, but if you don't want to, there's plenty of people next in line. I think Thomas will be next.
Thomas would be next. Commissioner Mulder.
I would be willing. I do have some experience. I did 13 years on the school board and chaired somewhere 4 to 6 years of that.
Absolutely.
Sounds good to me.
Anyone care to make a nomination?
I'll nominate Thomas Mulder as chair to fill the position of chair.
I'll second that.
Okay, great. Let's take these one at a time. So we have a nomination made by Commissioner Kiriazi, seconded by Commissioner O'Neill for Commissioner Mulder to become chair. Any further discussion on that before we vote? All in favor, let's just have a voice vote. Say aye.
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 Any opposed?
I'll abstain.
One abstention. Okay, so the motion passes 6-0 with Commissioner Mulder abstaining, that Commissioner Mulder will become the chair. I think that'll take effect next meeting, though. And then, thank you so much for being willing to step up. I think you'll be terrific. We do need someone to be the vice chair. Is anyone willing to volunteer themselves for that role?
I'd be happy to serve as vice chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Scavdall. Commissioner West.
I think that makes sense. I think Ivor, you would be the next in line chronologically as well.
I think that's right, actually. Yeah.
I'll make a motion to appoint Commissioner Scavdall as vice chair.
And I'll second that.
Wonderful. We have a motion by Commissioner Mulder, seconded by Commissioner O'Neill, for Commissioner Scavdall to become the vice chair. Any further discussion on that? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstain?
I will abstain.
Okay, so the motion passes 6-0 with Commissioner Scavdall abstaining, that Commissioner Scavdall becomes the vice chair. And thank you, Ivor, for agreeing to that as well. Thanks to both of you. All right. With that, we come to agenda modifications. Director Ford, any agenda modifications?
Yes, unfortunately, we do have some agenda modifications. So the first one, and in fact, they're all going to be on the consent calendar, so you're going to have to pull them to do this.
Okay.
But item number 4, the CDFW has requested additional time to provide comments, and so we're going to request that that be continued to May 2nd.
Okay.
Item number...
That's Mattole Valley Farms.
That is Mattole Valley Farms, yes. Item number 7, we expect to be pulled off consent and conduct a public hearing on that.
Right, that's the Garberville Sanitary District.
Correct. And then item number 8, there was an outdated document in the packet. I apologize for that. So we would ask that that be removed from consent and continued to the meeting of May 2nd. And when those get pulled, and I'll go back through the dates individually. For each
Okay.
motion. Each will require a separate motion.
Got it. Each will require a separate motion, and that is for I&I Ranch, the last one.
That is correct.
Okay. Wait a minute. I'm so sorry. No. We haven't gotten to consent yet. That was agenda modifications. Before we get to the consent, if there's nothing further, then I do want to invite public comment on non-agenda items. This is the time in each meeting when members of the public can comment on a matter that is within the purview of the Planning Commission, but is not any project on our agenda tonight. Is there anyone in the room wishing to comment on a matter not on the agenda? Seeing none, I will see if there's anyone on Zoom or phone who wishes to comment on a matter not on the agenda. Seeing no hands there, then we will close Section E, public comment on non-agenda items. And that brings us to the consent agenda. In addition to the consent matters that you said needed to be pulled,
I'm going to recuse myself from item number 3, so it was recommended that we do 2 consents.
Yes.
And I'll step out of the room for that.
sure. So we will pull that from the main consent agenda as well and just handle that with a separate vote with Commissioner O'Neill recused. So given that, that leaves on the consent. I will go through it and see if there's anything else that commissioners or members of the public wish to pull for questions or a discussion or hearing. The first item is the California Green Acres conditional use permit in the Alder Point area, which is simply recommended to continue to a date uncertain. So we're not going to take action on it other than the continuance. Is there anyone who wishes to comment on the continuance of California Green Acres? Okay, we'll leave that on consent. The second is Early Farms LLC conditional use permit in the Bloxburg area. That is similarly recommended for continuance to May 2nd. So are there any commissioners or members of the public wishing to comment on the continuance of that item? Seeing no hands, that will remain on consent. Item 3 is Be Kind Farms, CUP and special permit in the Wetchpeck area, and that, as already noted, we are going to pull from consent and have a separate vote. That is, I should note, recommended for denial. That is the staff recommendation for Be Kind Farms. Item 4, Mattole Valley Farms Business Support Services in the Salmon Creek area. The director has already asked us to pull that for a separate vote to continue. Sorry? I didn't, is that to me? I didn't.
There's hands that are up.
Oh, whoops, thank you. I'm so sorry. I thank you, Ms. Fleska. Yes, I see now that there is a hand up. I'm wondering if that pertains to Mattole Valley Farms, which we're already going to pull and have a separate vote on, so I can take public comment on that at that time. I see a hand, also another hand, 7108. So it's not on consent.
Chair, just to make sure, maybe it'd be good to
confirm what they're
Yes.
wanting to pull. Okay, yes. Let's just ask Public 7108, can I just be clear which item you were raising your hand to pull from consent?
The number 4.
Number 4, Mattole Valley Farms. Okay, very well. Then we will take public comment on that when that's already pulled from consent, so we'll come back to that. Commissioner Mulder?
But just a point of clarification, if we're pulling it just to continue, we would take public comment just on the continuance unless they couldn't attend on May 2nd. That'd be correct.
That's correct. And I do think for those, although we have them at the, well, let's come back to the order of things in just a moment when we get through the content calendar. Item 5 on consent is the Panther Canyon investments in the Benbow area that is recommended for approval. Is there anyone in the audience or on the commission wishing to pull that from consent for discussion or questions? Commissioner Kiriazi?
I just have a question. Is it appropriate to ask staff for clarifying questions without pulling for discussion?
I think it's probably not. If we're going to ask any questions, we should invite public comment. Doesn't mean we have to have a full report, but we'll handle it separately. So would you like to pull it? Okay. Thanks for asking. Okay, then with no other hands raised for that Panther Canyon investments will remain on consent. Number 6 is White Acres Family Farm in the Bridgeville area. Are there any commissioners wishing to pull that or ask questions about that? Is there anyone in the audience wishing to pull White Acres Family Farm for questions or discussion? Seeing no hands, we will leave that on consent. Item 7 is the Garberville Sanitary District Water System Improvements Project General Plan Conformance Review and Special Permit. That's already been pulled at the request of the director. And finally, I Ranch, permit extension in the Phillipsville area is also being pulled at the request of staff to continue it. So, just to review, because this is a little more complicated than usual. Remaining on consent, we have item 1, California Green Acres, continuing to a great date uncertain. Item 2, Early Farms, continuing to May 2nd. We pulled 3, we pulled 4. Item 5, Panther Canyon Investments, which is recommended for approval. Item 6, White Acres, recommended for approval. We pulled 7 and we pulled 8.
I'd like to make a motion to approve consent items 1, 2, 5, and 6.
I'll second.
Okay, thanks. We have a motion from Commissioner Skavdal, seconded by Commissioner Mulder to approve items 1, 2, 5, and 6 on consent or to move forward with the recommendation. Any further discussion on that? Then can we have a voice vote on the consent calendar, please? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstain? Seeing none, we will, the consent calendar is moved forward. Now, Director, unless you object, I would recommend that although the calendar, the agenda says,
Chair, could I just call your attention back to number 3, Be Kind Farms?
yes,
And it should probably act on that.
act on
consent.
that first.
Yes,
That was essentially part of consent, but we're just taking a separate vote.
Correct.
Got it.
And Commissioner O'Neill has left the room.
Commissioner O'Neill has left the room. She, in an abundance of caution, was recusing from this item simply due to her past employment with the Yurok tribe. And since it was not pulled by any other member of the public or the commission, we'll just take a similar vote on item 3, which is the recommendation for denial of the Be Kind Farms in the Wagepeck area. I don't think we need to do additional public comment on that, so.
I would make a motion to approve number 3, which is the denial of the conditional use for Be Kind Farms. That would, part of that also I'd like to add to support staff from reading through that, how many times staff reached out and tried to accommodate for site visits, and I can't think of the appropriate term, but we're not met with compliance, so this is the right action, I feel.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Mulder, seconded by Commissioner Curriasi. Any additional discussion? I would just second what Commissioner Mulder said. Recommendations for denial are few and far between, and in this case, as in all cases, the staff seems to have done everything possible to try to bring this project into compliance. So with that, I would invite a voice vote on the denial of Be Kind Farms. All in favor of the denial, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstaining? Okay, we have a unanimous vote, 6-0, with Commissioner O'Neill recused. And now she can return. And now, with,
Chair, I would recommend, I think this may be where you were going before, is at least the continuances.
Yeah.
Go ahead and just get those done and out of the way.
just the continuances.
Correct.
The item 7 that's pulled had a bunch of comments. I don't think we should put that in front of the public hearings, but the continuances shouldn't take any real
Right.
time. So, or not substantial time. So, that brings us to Mattole Valley Farms Business Support Services in the Salmon Creek area, which again, the staff recommendation is that we continue that to May 2nd, but that is the item that a member of the public raised their hand to comment. And I do want to remind them that if they are able to attend and comment on May 2nd, that would be the the appropriate place for substantive comment. However, if you can't or aren't sure if you will be able to comment or attend that meeting, then you are invited to make whatever comment you wish on the matter of Mattole Valley Farms. So that was Public 7108. Go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
I'll save my comments till the May 2nd meeting. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for respecting that. Since I am opening it up to that, is there anyone else in the audience in person or Zoom or phone who wishes to comment on the continuance of Mattole Valley Farms to the May 2nd meeting? Seeing none, then we will close public comment, and I would entertain a motion to continue that to May 2nd.
I'll move that we continue the Mattole Valley Farms Business Support Service LLC conditional use permit to our meeting on May 2nd.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Scavaldal, seconded by Commissioner McFarland, to continue Mattole Valley Farms Business Support Services to May 2nd. Any further discussion? Then let's have a voice vote on that motion, please. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstain? Okay, that passes unanimously, and that item is continued to May 2nd. Item 7, as noted, does have some public comment, and so we're going to treat that, as the agenda says, in the items pulled from consent later in the meeting. That simply brings us then to I&I Ranch permit extension, which needs to be, which the staff is requesting that we continue again to May 2nd?
Second, that is correct.
Okay. Is there any member of the public audience who wishes to comment on the continuation of the I&I Ranch to May 2nd, or if you're not able to attend that meeting, who wishes to comment substantively on the matter? Seeing no hands, we will close public comment, and I would welcome a motion.
I will move to continue I&I Ranch LLC permit extension to, did I hear correctly, the May 2nd meeting?
Yes. Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Curriasi, seconded by Commissioner O'Neill, to continue the I&I Ranch LLC permit extension to May 2nd. Any further discussion on that motion? Then let's have a voice vote. All in favor of the continuance, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstain? Motion passes unanimously. Okay. And with that, we come to new business, and the first project listed there is the SN Indianola Coastal Development Permit and special permits in the Bayside area. And I would welcome a staff report.
Thank you. Max Hilkin, Lako Associates, will be doing the presentation
Oh,
for
okay.
us remotely.
Great, thank you.
Apologies, I forgot to unmute myself there. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Max Hilkin with Lako Associates, and I'm presenting the SN Indianola Coastal Development Permit and Special Permits today before you. The proposed project includes a coastal development permit for the after-the-fact tree removal associated with a 10% dead, dying, or diseased tree CAL FIRE exemption, which is comprised of approximately 2.2 acres of trees that met the dead, dying, or diseased criteria being removed in late October and early November of 2023. The project proposes the planting of 1,350 one-year-old redwood trees to improve conifer stalking on the site. The special permits are for the major vegetation removal and to meet the requirements of the design review combining zone of the site. This slide is showing the site plan for the proposed project. The red circle before you is showing the approximate area where the timber removal occurred. And this slide is showing aerial imagery of the subject parcels in February of 2024. The red circle again is showing the approximate area where the timber removal occurred. The timber removal and the restocking are consistent with the Humboldt Bay Area Plan policies and did not occur in any sensitive habitat areas or affect coastal resources. The project was referred to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife on January 2nd, 2024, and a response was received from CDFW providing no comments at this time. The subject property is located within a designated coastal scenic area in the Humboldt Bay Area Plan, and the timber removal is consistent with the coastal scenic policies of the plan. Specifically, the timber removal and restocking does not impact the scenic and visual qualities of the area of impact, nor any views to or along the coast. The activities have not altered the natural landforms or the visible contour of important tree lines. The plan specifically requires developments in the Indianola area that are visible from Highway 101 to be subordinate to the character of the area and for timber management activities to conform to timber harvesting visual standards for special treatment areas. The timber management activities have not altered any views from the Highway 101 and involve no proposed development. Additionally, per the licensed forester, the activities are consistent with these standards of the Forest Practice Act. Based on the evidence, the project will not have an impact on sensitive or critical resource habitats. The proposed project conforms to the natural resource protection policies and standards of the Humboldt Bay Area Plan. An administrative special permit was prepared for this project. Prior to permit approval, a notice of intent to approve, or NOIDA, is sent to properties within 300 feet of the project site to notify neighbors of the pending approval. The notice states that a request for hearing can be requested and the project would be referred to the Planning Commission. A request for hearing was received by the Planning Department on February 5th, 2024, and is included as attachment 5 of the staff report. The project was noticed to property owners within 300 feet for tonight's hearing, and one public comment was received dated March 27th, 2024. The comments raised concern with the exemption used to harvest the trees and the potential for large-scale development on the property. Supplemental correspondence between the assigned planner and Commissioner Curiozzi, was provided prior to the hearing. The supplemental correspondence included a notice of violation from CAL FIRE dated October 31st, 2023, that included details regarding violations of the Forest Practice Act and inspection notes. The correspondence also included a timber operations work completed and stocking report prepared by the registered professional forester dated March 26th, 2024. On Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024, the assigned planner spoke with the CAL FIRE inspector who completed the report. The inspector indicated that the violations were procedural and no additional reports were prepared. A follow-up site inspection with a plant pathologist occurred and evidence was found to support the dead, diseased, or dying claim. No further action was taken. A follow-up site inspection for the report submitted on March 26, 2024 may occur in the next 6 months. Planning staff is recommending the Planning Commission make the required findings and adopt the resolution approving the coastal development permit and special permits for this project. This concludes my presentation. The agent and applicant are in attendance at tonight's hearing. Planning staff is available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hilken. Before we go to public comment, and even before I guess we have initial questions on the staff report, I should see if there's any commissioners who wish to make an ex parte disclosure pertaining to this item.
I did a drive-by. Did not speak to anybody at the site.
Okay.
I spoke with staff with clarifying questions.
Okay, great, thanks.
I guess, like way I also spoke with staff. I don't know if that's necessary for ex parte.
Yeah,
All of our correspondence was included as attachments.
it was, so certainly that would cover that. So, but just thanks for your diligence in doing some additional investigation. Okay, then we'll have public comment in a moment, beginning with the applicant or their agent. But are there any initial questions on this, on the staff report for Mr. Hilkin or Ms. Ryan? Yes, Commissioner Kiriazi.
I missed the comment at the end that something was going to happen within 6 months. Can you repeat what that was?
Excuse me, yes, that would be perhaps a follow-up inspection to the completion and the completion and stocking report that was submitted March 26, 2024, and included in the supplemental.
Follow up on the tree planting, essentially?
On the completion report, I think to verify that it went as described.
Great, thanks. Okay, well then, let's open public comment, and beginning with the applicant or their agent, you may take up to 10 minutes if you wish, Mr. White, for this presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair and Commission. Just had a couple items to point out that the property owner has invested in growing redwood throughout the county. They have many properties in the county that have purchased specifically for planting redwood and have planted tens of thousands of trees in the county. On the adjacent site that we're talking about, a redwood tree farm, they planted about 16 years ago. I was told by a forester that that farm already has substantial value. The owner is exercising the rights to manage timber on the site, and the property owner removed dead and dying trees and planted healthy young saplings to grow up and establish economic vitality on the site. And just wanted to touch in on that. We're available to answer any questions if you have them.
Any questions at this time for Mr. White?
I just have a question about how long the trees have to grow there before they're going to harvest them?
How long they have to grow before
Well, typically will grow, I guess.
I mean, I'm not a forester, but based on the information I gathered, that it was about 2008 that the trees were planted on the adjacent property, and today, 2024, so around that 16 years is what I was identifying, if I'm doing my math right, that they had reached approaching 12 inches in diameter and had substantial value. But in any case, any harvesting of timber requires that you would get a harvest permit.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions at this time? Okay, thanks. Well, if other questions come up, we can ask you later, but thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I'll be
presentation.
available.
And with that, then I will invite other public comments. Unless, yes, okay. So I do see, first let me just ask, is there anyone in the room wishing to comment in person on this item? Okay, seeing no other hands in the room, I will then go to Zoom and phone and invite public comment there. I do see one hand up from Larry Glass, Safe NEC. Go ahead, sir. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. I have been following this area for quite some time, particularly after Security National had announced they were going to try and accomplish a large housing complex there. So, and I live nearby and I walk my dog past this site all the time, so I'm really familiar with the site. And I watched as Fegus logged the site, and I did not see any dead or dying trees removed from the site. All I saw were vibrant, living, large trees removed from the site. And it is true that they have replanted it with lots of little redwoods, but I would say the place is, the property is overstocked with redwoods. is way too many redwoods. But that's the property owner's choice. If they want to grow them like dog hair, I guess you can do that. But I just wanted to dispute that there was dead and dying trees removed from that site, because I saw them up close and they weren't dead or dying. And also in the packet for the agenda item, it says that there's no further development for this site. So does that mean that the proposed housing development is no longer scheduled for this site? Thank you.
Sure, you're very welcome. And yes, we may be able to get into that question when we get through public comment. Is there anyone else on Zoom or phone wishing to comment on the SN Indianola after the fact permit? Okay, then seeing no other hands, I will close public comment and bring it back to the commission, but the director, I think, would like to respond.
Yeah, I think we do want to respond to that. Do you want to respond to that, or you want me to?
Absolutely. So the two things. First, I will mention that there was a petition that was submitted about 2 years ago and approved by the Board of Supervisors to change the zoning of the property to potentially facilitate a multifamily housing development. That was a rezone petition. With rezones, the process is to file a petition with the Board of Supervisors. They decide whether to even accept an application. The follow-up application that potentially would be submitted here has not been submitted. So you're looking at a petition that was probably very speculative a couple of years ago. There has not been an application.
Sorry, just one moment. Mr. Glass, can you mute, or have we done that now? Yeah, no problem.
Sure. So there has not been an application submitted to do that. So I think at this point it's a little speculative as to what that development might be. And as you heard, the land was restocked. Secondly, as to the dead, dying, and diseased trees, we understand from the forester that he believes that they were. I don't have any specific knowledge to contradict what the forester has stated, and I think you heard Ms. Ryan mention that the pathologist from CAL FIRE also did some investigation, which found that there was likely some dead, dying, and diseased trees in the area.
Thank you. Commissioner Mulder.
Through the chair to staff. So to piggyback on that, my understanding, disclosure, I have an LTO, but it's just for property owners. My understanding is CAL FIRE is the jurisdiction that implements the Forestry Practices Act, and they are the professionals that if they agree with an RPF study or agree with a site visit, we need to take that as what it is and not challenge that. Just as if an RPF gives us a report, unless there's a contradictory report from another RPF, we should take that as face value as well.
I think that's fair to say. The CAL FIRE is the party that's responsible for implementing the forest practice rules. So if this was not located in the coastal zone or in an area that requires design review, there would be no county discretionary action here.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kiriazi?
Yeah, thank you through the chair to staff. I appreciate staff's time in my inquiry regarding the notice of violations. I think where I ended up on this was going back and forth on the conditions of approval that the project must conform to the permit issued by CAL FIRE. And because the way that the notice of violations was written, it did not read to me that they did conform to that that permit issued. So it felt like either we need to agree to remove that condition of approval, which didn't seem appropriate to me, or we discuss, either send it back to staff or think about that process, because the way I read it is it did not actually conform to the permit issued by CAL FIRE.
Mm-hmm.
I'll kind of jump in. It seems like we're looking for a response. So I think our interpretation of the violation, and thank you for bringing that up, was that it was related to the LTO, the timber operator. There was a lack of fire suppression equipment on the site. He did not have a copy of the timber harvest information on site. So it was related to the operator himself, the procedure that was occurring, not the actual timber harvest or timber harvest exemption that occurred, not the tree removal. That was the way that we had looked at that. I think it's fair to say that you could remove that condition because regardless of whether there's a condition there or not, they're still bound to follow the CAL FIRE regulations.
If I could respond.
Yes, Commissioner Kiriazi.
Thank you. And I think there was a third condition they violated, which was providing notice of timber operations prior to starting those operations.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
Did you want to comment, Commissioner McFarland?
I have a comment, but I want to make sure that's wrapped up.
Thank you. Yeah, it is for me. Thank you.
Okay, so my comment is a little bit different. Is there any way to confirm that somebody else, whether it was the forester or the pathologist, which I understand was after the fact, confirmed that the trees were actually dead and dying before they were removed?
My understanding from speaking with CAL FIRE is the pathologist looks for other evidence on the site, such as spores or soil conditions, to suggest that there are maybe plants or biology there to that are related to diseases, to trees and roots, is the best way I can explain it.
But that's after the fact?
Yes.
Okay. I guess that's a concern that I hold, and you know, the public made the same comment, that there was no confirmation that these trees were in fact dead or dying. So that's one of my thoughts. And the other, the tree planting plan, I was expecting to see like monitoring criteria, success criteria attached. I don't see that. And so this, you know, I don't want to speculate, but without attached success criteria, you know, what is the enforceability of this, the value?
The interesting thing here is that the exemption for dead, dying, and diseased is an exemption from a timber harvest plan from CAL FIRE. And so the idea being that they didn't have to go through the timber harvest plan, but they're not, it's not a conversion or anything like that. So I would assume that CAL FIRE would be following up on that, and that may be what their comments indicating that a follow-up site visit might be appropriate. But you're correct to note that there was not a success criteria listed in the timber replanting.
I do just want to get a little bit clearer on one thing. So the notice of violations that Commissioner Kiriazi referenced, one of them was a failure to notify of operations. But who did they fail to operate? Or because I'm looking at the letter from Stephen Homan, and as I read that, that's attachment 6, letter from Forrester, it speaks to CAL FIRE reviewing the document, notifying the public, et cetera, seemingly before operations, yes? So I guess I'm not clear on who was not notified or what didn't happen.
After, so one of the attachments in the staff report is the letter of acceptance from CAL FIRE that says we accepted your exemption and you can move forward with what you're proposed with. That was in September of 2023. Prior to removing any trees, a notice should have been given to CAL FIRE that said, hello, we're going to get going.
I see. Got it.
That's the notice that didn't occur.
Okay. All right.
And then they subsequently went to the site after that.
Okay. Commissioner Mulder?
But the notice of operations, from my experience, it's like literally filing a piece of paper with the state. You're already have an approved plan. It's just saying we're starting operations. So I don't personally view it as like a very large violation. It is a violation, but it's on a 10% dead and dying. It's not on like 1,000-acre ranch that they're cutting or something like that with protected habitat and biological resources.
That's my understanding, that, yeah, it is a procedural item.
Sure.
I'm confused.
Commissioner O'Neill.
So if someone violates a CAL FIRE rule, that's between them and CAL FIRE, and they would get a fine or whatever. I mean, obviously, this individual, if they're in the timber business, should know how to cut down trees and not get notified. But how does that impact what we're approving today? I mean, they didn't get fined by the county, so how does it impact our ability to not make a decision or make a decision?
In the way I read it, or the reason I was inquiring about it is because on the permits we're approving, it includes a condition for approval that they are stay in conformance with the CAL FIRE permit issued. And the way I read,
or retroactively?
that's, well, I think this whole thing is retroactive, which is puts us, at least feels like it puts myself in an awkward position. But yeah, so the way I read it is that violation put them out of conformance with the permit issued by CAL FIRE.
So at this point, they've already replanted trees, and they're asking for retroactive sort of approval. And what would our alternatives be? You can't put the trees back that you cut down, and you could, if you go in there and start tearing up the trees that you've just planted, you're going to create a bigger mess. So, sorry, he's always on me about that. So, I mean, what is the alternative if you don't approve this permit?
I think maybe it's not a question of should we approve it, but simply do we need to make a slight adjustment to the wording of the condition of approval number 2 in light of the procedural violations that occurred with that, with compliance of that.
That's how I would read it, but I do also feel like both county staff and the commission have been put into a situation where I think that it begs the question of, is it possible for a landowner to fell valuable trees and for merchantable trees under a permit? It is not our place to enforce the Forest Practice Act, but it feels like we're being put into this position potentially. But I would say that the clearest path forward that I see is to remove that condition of approval.
Director Ford?
Thank you, Chair. I would agree that condition 1 really can be removed. And if it be the pleasure of the commission, could be replaced with a requirement to have a monitoring program set up to have monitoring at maybe 2, 3, and 5 years, and demonstrate a certain percentage of success with the trees that have been planted at each of those stages. And I also want to point out that if the applicant had gotten the timber harvest plan, a coastal development permit would not be required. Okay? And so there is debate about whether or not an exemption is actually a timber harvest plan. And historically, it has not been interpreted to be such. In this particular case, there seems to have been a strange little loophole in terms of communication between CAL FIRE, the Coastal Commission, and the county about what happens when a exemption is issued within the coastal zone. What they did was they posted on a website that nobody knows about that they're going to issue this permit. And we're supposed to be able to look at that and know that we need to contact them and say, oh, before you issue that permit, they need a coastal development permit. In all honesty, it was the first I was aware of that process. I don't think anybody else in our staff was aware of that process. So we've learned something new. But so the applicant, has explained to us, they felt like they were doing everything right, going through this process. And I know that there's some speculation here that the trees have been removed to facilitate future development. Fact of the matter is this area right here is currently considered timberland. It has been growing timber, it's capable of growing timber, will continue to grow timber. Before it can be developed with anything else, not only does it need to be rezoned, but a timber conversion needs to be approved.
Right.
To allow this to have the timber removed and to have it developed as something else. So it really is a matter of looking at the facts of, yep, trees were removed. We could speculate whether or not they were diseased and dying all day long. We have evidence on the record that they were. But then the real question is from a coastal perspective, what's the best thing that could happen with this site right now? And I think that it is fair that from a coastal perspective, the county does have an interest in seeing the trees continue to grow at this location. That seems to be the applicant's objective. And I think that a condition identifying that, the 1,200 trees that were planted, that, I would be making numbers up here in terms of percentages, in terms of what would normally be there, but that's normally the success criteria within a replanting plan, that a certain percentage of those trees be viable, thriving at 1, 2, 3, in 3 years or 5 years.
Thank you for that clarification. Commissioner Mulder.
So, I hear you. And for me, I have a little bit of a challenge to implement, it's the Forestry Practices Act and the Coastal Zone, like I'm trying to merge the two and understand them better there. I would have a hard time. I feel that those 300 trees per acre, I don't have my book with me, but I think it's well above the minimum stocking standards. So if we were going to do any monitoring, I'd want to make sure we tie it back to whatever minimum stocking standards are to tie it back to the forestry practices, if that's where we go. I'm kind of a little uncomfortable going there, but I'm just one person.
Commissioner Scavdall.
I did drive by here. This is, just to put in perspective, this is a little project. Yes, it is. This is a small project. Like, I had to drive by and then drive back by to try to figure out where the trees have been cut. Okay, it's not a very big. I don't know a lot about timber harvesting, but this says 10%. Does that mean that the removal was 10%, that 90% of the trees remained? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, that's my understanding
There's
of a
lot of large
specified
trees
area.
left on this piece of property. Plus the 1,300 one-year-old trees that they planted.
Right.
So I think we're making, quite frankly, a big deal out of not much right here. That's my personal opinion. I'm ready to move forward on this. But
Sure. Commissioner McFarland.
Definitely respect both of your opinions. I do believe, bringing it back to, we're here to determine if this should be granted a CDP. Having worked extensively with coastal development permits in the past, I think that Director Ford's suggestion of adding the monitoring condition is more than fair. It's what every other coastal development permit with impacts even smaller than this are required to do. And I think that if they truly are invested in growing these trees to become marketable, then they should have no problem meeting the success criteria. So I think putting in a monitoring requirement with a reporting at whatever the appropriate amount of years would also satisfy the public comment about the speculation of the potential for building. So I think it's a minor issue. If we can put those in, then I would be happy to move on.
Commissioner Mulder.
So, I just want to go back to minimum stocking standards within forest land. So if this was done under a 10% dead and dying, 90% of the timber is still there, this property without even planting trees very well may meet minimum stocking standards. I'm not a RPF. I don't know that answer, but I really, really want to make sure that we pay attention to what those minimum stocking standards are and don't overreach, putting conditions on property or land that meet the basic requirements of the Forestry Practices Act.
I certainly understand that. I don't know the minimum stocking criteria, that you just mentioned, so I'd be happy to either continue that later or, one thing I don't want to set precedent for future applicants coming to get CDPs under the county's LCP program where they think they will not be required to do monitoring for their mitigation. So I want to be clear on that, but if you want to maybe take more time to detail that condition so that it meets, your concerns, Commissioner Molnar, I'm happy to delay that. That's fine.
Can we get a little bit of clarification on what the norm is with regard to monitoring of mitigation for CDPs?
Well, typically there's like a 3 to 5 year monitoring period to make sure that the plants that have been replaced are stable and sustainable moving into maturity. So like after 1 year, a certain percentage of the plants need to be there 2 years, 3 years, up to 5 years. And so really one of the things that a condition could say is that at 1, 3, and 5 years, that the site will be evaluated by an RPF to ensure that the number of viable trees that are continuing to grow on site would meet the minimum stocking standards in accordance with the Forest Practices Act. I mean, it could be that simple.
Mm-hmm. So it's not a terribly onerous additional requirement.
It doesn't have to be.
Yeah. Yes, Commissioner
With
McFarland.
one small addition, the monitoring requirement often, in addition to exactly what Director Ford just states, it also requires a review of the presence of invasive species. So as long as we're not seeing some percentage of, let's say, the very common blackberry brambles that we see overtaking that area. So there'd just be a slight addition to what Director Ford said about invasive species colonizing the area.
Commissioner Scavdall.
My only concern is I didn't actually see that the applicant was required to do the restocking. They decided to plant trees on this site. So are we asking them to do a monitoring plan on the trees that they decided to plant here?
Well, since we do, this is a question that perhaps the applicant's agent would be able to illuminate. So, Mr. White, please come on up and perhaps you can speak to that point or other points.
Thank you. We do have additional representatives that are on the line that raised their hand, and Mr. Brad Johnson. But I think that the idea and perspective of what we're doing is a 10% dead and dying. There was 30 trees removed over an area. The majority of the area that was replanted is an existing prairie that didn't have anything to do with the trees. And we planted 1,350 trees. And you can see on the adjacent parcel that over the last 16 years, these redwood trees have taken off and had a very high success rate. And so when we're talking about doing some sort of mitigation, in my opinion, that's usually when there's some sensitive habitat or something affected. I did walk the site with the RPF and the LTO, and the forester pointed out all the trees that had indications of disease, including browning, heavy moss, lichen, heavy English ivy, and dead tops. The forester indicated these are all trees that have a low probability of survival. And so I did walk through, and I believe that is the trees that were targeted, and there were about 30 of them. And it's planted with 1,350. So again, just going through that condition, it just doesn't seem appropriate to have a mitigation. And the 10% dead and dying requirement doesn't have a restocking requirement. So that was a voluntary restocking of 1,350 trees. And so, if you were mitigating or having some, what are we gonna go, make sure 30 trees survive? Or, anyways, to me, it seems a
Right.
little bit onerous to accept that condition when it doesn't appear appropriate here.
Technically, the term mitigation as it's normally employed wasn't relevant to this operation.
That's the way that I understand it, yes.
Thanks. Any other question for the agent?
What were the species that were removed, that were dead and dying? I mean, because this is a redwood area. I mean,
Yeah,
redwoods traditionally would grow in that
I
coastal
believe,
area.
is it in the staff report?
Yeah, grand fir. They were majority fir trees.
Thank you. That was clarifying. Oh, yes, Commissioner McFarland.
So just bringing it back to the focus being the CDP, not the CAL FIRE exemption, and maybe this is a question for staff, I'm not sure. If they had brought this forward with the removal of 30 fir trees, what would be, under the LCP, your standard issue mitigation package?
It would be entirely dependent upon the circumstance associated with the site. And keep in mind that this was not evaluated to just replace that limited area of trees that were removed. Trees had been planted on a much larger area on the property. Certainly 1,350 trees is a much, much larger than would be required to replace 30.
Well, as I see it, we've had a good discussion. We have three choices. We can simply, nobody's really talking about not approving this. We can either approve it as recommended with the conditions in the packet. We can approve it without the condition number 1, which speaks to the CAL FIRE exemption, or we can approve it with or without that condition with an additional condition that has been discussed. So I think at this point, we need to put a motion forward and see which way it goes.
Brad
Yes,
Johnson
Commissioner.
still has his hand up.
Sorry? Well, Brad Johnson, I mean, we have closed public comment, but is that,
He's the applicant.
he's the applicant? Okay, sure. I guess, given that you didn't speak before, Mr. Johnson, I will welcome your brief input now.
Well, thank you. I will be very brief. I did just want to reiterate what Mr. White had said, and is
Oops, that was my fault.
Sorry, we just cut you off. We muted you for a moment. Can you just begin again, Mr. Johnson?
sure, certainly, yeah, no problem. So just to reiterate and build on what Mr. White has said, if we had come in and asked the county for a CDP under the LCP in connection with the dead and dying, I think we would have been met with some raised eyebrows, because it's not really a kind of a discretionary permit. It's something that we have a right to do under the Forest Practices Act. And so the question of whether the removal of 30 dead and dying trees would have required any mitigation at all, my position on that is it would not have. And so one thing I want to make clear is that, as has been said, the applicant was not required to replant, was not required under the dead, dying, and exemption, and certainly would not have been required to plant 1,315 trees under a CDP if one had been issued before. So to bring those things back into perspective, the applicant operates redwood timber activities on a number of its properties. That's what it does. It's what it's doing here. And of course, the applicant has the right to remove those trees at any time, subject to, of course, obtaining a THP and following the normal processes. And just to reiterate, a THP itself does not require a CDP. So this is, like Director Ford said, a weird kind of little jog in the law. And that's why we're here tonight. But I do want to, in terms of being concerned about precedent, step away from the idea of requiring some sort of mitigation or monitoring program for trees that are part of a normal timber operation.
Thank you very much. Okay. Returning to the commission.
I'm prepared to make a motion that we approve the project with the conditions of approval as stated in the staff report, including condition number 1 that says all development shall conform to the approved plot plan, project description, tree planting plan, and approved CAL FIRE exemption. I believe that puts the onus on CAL FIRE, and CAL FIRE has already stated that they've approved the project. So that's my motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Scavdall, seconded by Commissioner Mulder. Any further discussion on that motion before we call for a vote? Oh, yes, Commissioner Kiriazi.
I think Commissioner Scavdall, what you said, that clearly puts the responsibility on CAL FIRE does make sense, and to leave that in, that makes sense to me.
Okay. Well, Tripp, could we have a roll call vote on this one, please?
Ivor Scavdall,
Yes.
Noah Levy,
Yes.
Thomas Mulder,
Yes.
Peggy O'Neill,
Yes.
Sarah West,
Yes.
Jerome Krause,
Yes.
and Lorna McFarland.
No.
Okay, motion passes 6-1. Thank you all. I think since it's just 7:06, we ought to be able to get through the next item before a break, if that's okay with everybody. Okay? Then yes, let's move on to the Sutter parcel map subdivision and special permits in the McKinleyville area. And whenever staff is ready, I would welcome a staff report.
So we should be screen sharing. Are you seeing that on your end? There you go.
Yep, there you are.
All right, I got it together. Good evening, my name's Rodney Yandell. I'll be presenting for the Sutter Parcel Map Subdivision and Special Permits this evening in the McKinleyville area. This project consists of a minor subdivision resulting in 4 parcels and a remainder to host existing and proposed residential development. The project also involves a special permit to allow the existing detached garage and accessory structures to remain on proposed parcel 1 prior to the development of a main building. Also included is a special permit to allow for lot size modification. There are exemption requests from the applicant from the Public Works required road and width and sidewalk requirements. Road width and sidewalk requirements, excuse me. The subject parcel has a land use designation of residential low density for 1 to 7 units per acre. It is zoned residential 1 family with a special 10,000 square foot building site combining zone and combining zones for manufacturing home and noise impact. To dig into the lot size modification request, parcels 1 and 3 will be approximately 417 square feet smaller than the 10,000 square foot minimum lot size for the R1 B2 zone. The granting of this lot size modification will allow these parcels 1 and 3, to provide the required access easements for the benefit of the remainder parcel and parcel 4. I made this really small, so it's hard for you to see, but the project is located at the terminus of Sutter Road in the southeast portion of McKinleyville. Here's an overview of the subject parcel to be subdivided, and it kind of shows the parcels around it have been part of past subdivisions by the Sutter family. I don't have a pointer. Maybe I can do this. well, it's kind of difficult, but this is the parcel map, the tentative parcel map. And if you can follow the cursor, which is moving on its own now, hopefully you guys have looked at it, but it shows the access road, and it shows the proposed Road 1 and 2 that would serve the all of the parcels. I'm going to dig into the exemption requests. The first one, the applicant is requesting that the 40-foot easements for access roads 1 and 2 required by Public Works be reduced to 20 feet in width, and Public Works supports that exception. The applicant is also requesting that the requirement by Public Works to construct a pedestrian sidewalk on the east side of Azalea Avenue within the subdivision, north of Sutter Road, be waived by the Commission. The applicant is claiming that the cost benefit of the sidewalk construction will not be feasible due to the physical layout and conditions on site that limit the functionality of the sidewalk system. Public Works does not support this exception. If you can see there, Azalea Road coming off Sutter Road, you can see the yellow line, which is where the sidewalk would be required to be. And the sidewalk terminates at that area in the north because that's where Azalea Road no longer would be classified as a road, but be a driveway at that point. I'm going to show you some pictures that I went to the site. This first picture is me at Sutter Road looking up.
Chair,
Yes,
can I just ask a question while we're on Azalea Road?
certainly. Yes, Commissioner Scavdell.
Thank you. So is that a dedicated public road or is it a private driveway?
It's a private drive.
From the point where we see this picture right here where there's a sidewalk and there's an actual driveway, you go into that. They're
Yeah,
calling
that's
it Azalea Road, that whole thing
They're
is a
calling it
private.
Azalea Road. It's a private drive, but right now it's serving more than two, well, it's serving two properties, two residences, two
Okay.
parcels. It would be serving more than that, so that section would be considered a road by definition.
So we can require a sidewalk on a private driveway
Well, it's going to be considered a road if the subdivision gets approved.
if it's considered a road, it's going to be dedicated to the public?
It would be dedicated to the subdivision and the parcel to the west, which already accesses off this drive.
Okay, so it's a private roadway that individual parcels are going to have an easement over.
Yes.
Thank you.
So this might be a little bit of overkill, but I got 3 more pictures after this. This first one is, you can see the grass area there. That's where the sidewalk would begin its construction going north. Oh, wrong button. See here. This is a little bit further north where the sidewalk would continue. The next 2 slides, I went to the north side of this and looked down. So there again on the left, the sidewalk would be there in that grass area, and moving down to meet the second slide I showed you. Now, in order for your commission to waive this requirement, 3 findings would have to be made. Number 1, there would have to be special circumstances or conditions affecting the property. Number 2, the exception is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of the substantial property right. And number 3, granting the exception will not be detrimental to the public or injurious to other property in the area where the project is situated. Staff is recommending that the commission find the project exempt from environmental review pursuant to section 15183 of CEQA guidelines, and make all the required findings for approval of the parcel map subdivision and special permits, and approve the project subject to the recommended conditions of approval. Alternatively, the commission could make the findings for approval of the parcel map subdivision, special permits, and sidewalk exception subject to the recommended conditions of approval. or you could require further environmental review or deny the parcel map subdivision and special permits. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Yandel. And just a quick question. So the recommended conditions of approval include the reduction of the easement from 40 feet to 20 feet, which Public Works supports, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. I just want to quickly say that as far as ex parte disclosures, I did visit the site on foot, pretty much just walked that stretch that you showed a couple pictures of. Are there any other ex parte disclosures here? Commissioner McFarland.
I also visited the site and called staff with clarifying questions.
Thank you. I should say I didn't speak to anyone about it. Commissioner Scavdall.
I also visited the site.
Thanks. Okay. And then we will, if there aren't any other questions at this stage for Mr. Yandel, oh yes, Commissioner Kiriazi.
Thank you. Can you clarify that the reduction from 40 feet to 20 feet means that each of the access roads is 10 feet in width? Is that what that means?
No, the right-of-way would be 20 feet in width for each road.
So I see. So the original request was each access road is 40 feet in width?
That's correct.
Got it.
Not the road exactly being 40 feet in width, but the
The right of way, right, which includes utility right of way. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Yandel at this time?
Just so I understand the whole sidewalk thing. So if we approve it, we're approving it with them installing the sidewalks, right? Unless we change.
At this point, and this is kind of tricky, this is my first one like this, okay? But staff is in support of Public Works' recommendation to have the sidewalk.
Okay, and then
If
the sidewalk is located on the property owner who's getting the permits property and not any of the existing property owners?
It would be exclusively on the property owner's property.
Okay. Because they're getting a narrower right of way, they would have sufficient space on their property, not the existing owners.
And from what I was told by other planners, that if the applicant, which I'm not sure if they're here or not, is able to make an argument for the commission to make the 3 findings, that you guys would have the opportunity or the option to waive the requirement for the sidewalk.
And none of the existing property owners has spoken up and said, we don't want a sidewalk, we're fine.
Well, they requested that be waived.
Not the property owner. They own the properties that join it already. Okay, I got it.
Yes.
Commissioner Kiriazi, and we will still get to public comment in a moment, but yes.
Thank you. One other question. There's the additional statement that the road apron at Sutter Road would be retrofitted to meet current urban driveway standards. I'm just kind of curious what that means.
Well, it would have to be upgraded to meet ADA standards, and any signage or anything of that nature would have to be put in place.
It typically also, it means, well, at least when I've done projects, that you have to have the sidewalks there, and you're going onto another road, so you have to pave it.
Yeah.
So right now, I think it just, like, for the example, the edges go straight out, so they would have to be swept out and that type of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, we certainly can ask staff more questions later, but if there's no questions at this time, yes. Okay. We do, then let's go to public comment, beginning as usual with the applicant or the applicant's agent, if they're here in the room. Yes, please, sir, come on up, and you can have up to 10 minutes if you wish for an extended presentation.
Okay, thank you. I'm Keith Castonguay. I'm the agent for the applicant. And I just wanted to clarify a couple points on that sidewalk topic. That was one of the issues I'd like to talk about tonight with everyone. That section is a lot steeper than it looks. Fortunately, a couple people came in here and they said that they'd walked it or looked at it in person. It is a private road. It's not a public road. This is a minor subdivision under 16411-1. Under the government code, the sidewalks are not required typically in California on private roads. We're not dedicating this road to the county. The steepness is also counterproductive in terms of the engineering and the grading and the cost to produce an ADA compliant sidewalk with those steep slopes, you know, with the kind of on the north side there with all the trees, and the safety would be difficult too for people. And not only that, the sidewalk would be a dead-end sidewalk that would go to nothing. It would connect to nothing. And we'll have gravel roads abutting up an ADA compliant sidewalk with aprons, and it's extremely difficult to meet the grades on that property to get the 2% grade for the aprons just on the ADA sidewalks themselves, let alone the entire section there that I was talking about. But most importantly, it is a private driveway. It's not a public road. And sidewalks, there's no ordinance that stipulates that sidewalks are required in minor subdivisions in Humboldt County in this situation. So we're asking for leniency on this because it's a burden on the cost of developing the project, which money can be used in other areas of this project. In terms of the encroachment area where Sutter Road and Azalea meet here at the bottom of the property, we will be dedicating, giving to the county essentially a 10-foot easement over and above the existing sidewalk that's there now off of Sutter Road for future development of a nicer sidewalk system, including ADA, which isn't even out there right now. There are some constraints on the existing sidewalk with telephone poles and stop signs, so that we're willing to improve the encroachment to the standards that are required and also meet the signage requirements. But the sidewalk going north, proceeding along Azalea Avenue, which services the subdivision, it would be a burden, I believe, to have that sidewalk imposed on this project.
Okay.
And I welcome questions. I mean, I'm trying to summarize it the best I can. When I looked at code 66411.1, government code for California, and since we're not dedicating it, the 845 civil code doesn't apply in this instance, there should be no sidewalk requirement, and there's no ordinance that says that we're required to have one. Now, the McKinleyville Community Services Plan does say that in certain instances, it would be nice if we could have sidewalks, but it's somewhat discretionary into whether or not we would allow them. So you have like staff was indicating, you have a right to approve or deny the project, and we're asking for leniency on that sidewalk just on Azalea. And the rest of the project looks great. I had two other issues to bring up, but I think the biggest one was the sidewalk.
Well, why don't you go ahead and continue whatever
About the sidewalk.
Okay.
Can the sidewalk be on the other side? Because can it only be on the right side? Because when I was looking at the pictures, where you're at, I like sidewalks, and I think that they are good because some people like myself fall, and if you have a nice sidewalk, it's much safer. But I saw that grade too, thinking like you need a retaining wall. If you start taking out any of that slope, all of that mud and stuff is going to start going over the top of the sidewalk, so you almost have to have a small little retaining wall. So if you move the sidewalk to the other side of the road, it didn't seem like there was as much slope, and it might be easier.
From your vantage point, that would seem logical, but the other side's worse, not in terms of the...
Could you put that picture back up that showed looking up that road where the slope is?
The reason why it's worse is because we have two driveways that branch off to the left to private residences that drop off. And I don't see any way it'd be possible, and forgive me, but I think it'd be... I'm not an
engineer. We have an engineer here. Maybe he could give us and you that walked the site might have a better perspective, but it seemed a little steep there, and I've done sidewalks before, and it seems almost like you're gonna have a small curbing there or retaining wall to hold up that hill slope.
Well, it is a minor subdivision, infill project. This isn't the highly desirable land that's easy to develop. It is a private road. It would be a dead-end sidewalk. It wouldn't continue anywhere. We would bring in, attracting people to be walking up a steep hill, maybe in the winter.
People live there and they walk on, kids go to school and they walk on sidewalks and, they don't get ran over if they're on a sidewalk as easily. So there's a lot of advantages to having a sidewalk.
Yeah.
It's just,
So if I could just ask, because I know you had some other points you wanted to make in your presentation. Why don't we let you go through that, and then we will have an opportunity to do a back and forth with questions later.
That's fair. The special permit that's being called for because the lot size don't meet the minimum lot of 10,000 square feet under the lot modification rule. So we have 2 lots that turned out to be 0.22 acres, and we need like 0.25 acres or 0.23 acres in order to meet that. So two lots that we can solve that problem with with moving a couple lines a few feet. We're talking 400 square feet. So I think we should talk about that. That would be a condition that we do that and satisfy that. And then we would be absolved from having the responsibility of preparing another special permit for the project.
Can I just interject really quick?
You gotta let him finish.
Yeah, we'll come back to staff, but let's just have the applicant finish his presentation, and then if we need further clarification, we'll ask you more questions.
Thank you. And all the lots are larger than the 10,000 square feet, but we've applied a net calculation to developable area, as opposed to there's roadway easements in there too that expand this out to quite a bit more than 10,000 square feet per lot. I don't remember the lot modification rule asking for the net developable area lot. It was just the overall area of lots that are created under this rule. So all the lots are in compliance. It's just if there is a requirement to use net developable area, subtracting out the easement for roadway, then 2 lots are 1/100th of an acre below the minimum that's required. So we can easily rectify that by just adjusting a couple lines. And I know that staff wanted to make a comment on that and knows more about that than I would. Also, the project's calling under section 1.7D of the Public Works exhibit for drainage easement from for other surrounding properties. So that, I've not seen that before. So I wanted to ask about that one. And so we would have to take responsibility for drainage off of the neighboring property. We already have prepared drainage plans for the impacts that this project would create. And we're retaining water from this project, not detaining it. So imposing an easement for the unforeseen event as what's going to happen around the neighborhood doesn't make sense under CEQA. There is project-related impacts and impacts that are peripheral that aren't part of the project, and that would be one. So I think that item either needs to be clarified by staff or removed. Personally, that's how I feel. And then there's some discussion in here with regards to secondary units, and I wanted to ask are we denying secondary units? Because I thought that the state of California wasn't going to allow that. So there's a reconveyance option in here, and I just don't see under 11 under the staff report for conditions of approval a parkland fee of $3,692 may be paid providing the applicant enters into a conveyance agreement and development rights with the county of Humboldt for secondary dwelling units. So that's for parcels 1, 2, 3, and 4. So is that giving us the chance to reconvey the rights to secondary dwellings? Or if we pay that amount as opposed to paying the $8,600 that's being asked for parkland fees? So I had a question on that one, but I'm sure that could be easily answered by Rodney.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure staff has taken note of the questions you raise. And as I said, if we need to clarify things with you, we will call you up for further questions.
Okay, thank you.
But thank you for that presentation.
All right,
I do now want to allow any other members of the public who wish to comment on this to do so. Is there anyone in the room wishing to comment on this item? And seeing no hands, is there anyone on Zoom or phone who wishes to make a comment on this item, the Sutter parcel map subdivision? Are you standing up to make a comment? Please, yes. Yes, please, go ahead, sir. Just to be clear, you're not affiliated with this project, or are you?
I am Robert Sutter, so I'm.
Oh, you are Robert Sutter, okay. All right, I didn't realize you were also here. Well, sure. Okay, go ahead as the applicant.
So, anyway, so I live on the property.
Yeah.
And I've been there for a number of years. And it's kind of a unique situation. It's just this little pocket of land, 2 acres, that's surrounded by the Sutter Ranch subdivision. So there's no through traffic related to this parcel. So this 2-acre development is all that's really going to be ever developed on this little road. And so really I guess addressing the need for sidewalks, I guess worst case scenario, you're going to have 10 houses with maybe a couple cars coming and going during the day. So, maybe 10, 20 trips in and out on this road. So there's just such a small amount of traffic. I guess I just don't see the need to have this significant sidewalk installed. It's, from the pictures, you can see it's a rural setting, and here again, very little traffic, and so I just hope you'll consider the suggestion that the sidewalk requirement be waived. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else on Zoom or phone wishing to comment on this item before we close public comment? Okay, seeing none, I will close public comment, bring it back to the commission and staff, and I first would invite Mr. Yandel. You wanted to make a couple of clarifying points, I believe.
Yes, and excuse my interruption.
Okay.
I get a little excited. The first thing I wanted to discuss is the lot size modification. The parcels are larger than 10,000 square feet, but they do have they are in the B2 zoning district, which is a combining zone that requires a 10,000 square foot building site. Mm-hmm. So when you have a parcel of 1 acre or less, the right-of-ways and road easements subtract from the building site area. Mm-hmm. So a parcel that could be 0.7 acres could be so encumbered that it doesn't allow for a 10,000 square foot building site. So these 2 parcels that the lot size modification are subject to, I said that in reverse, those are encumbered by easements. So staff does support the lot size modification. And in reference to needing another special permit, the special permit is in this staff report. No further staff report work would have to be done.
Right, that's what I wanted clarified.
It's all right here.
It's already been done. It's already here. This is not an extra step they have to go through.
It's not an extra step. Okay. Secondary units. As you know, the state has, they have a new law that ADUs are principally permitted on parcels that are zoned residential. So when we did the parkland dedication fee calculation, we had to assume 2 residential units per parcel. Mm-hmm. So the total of all that equals the $8,000 or whatnot fee. If they want to give development rights for future ADUs to the county, the fee could be reduced. And that's all written up in the condition. Mm-hmm. And that's what that's all about.
Thank you for that.
Cliff was going to discuss the drainage. Public Works isn't here to help us out with their conditions, right. So we're doing this here. I want to go back to if in fact the commission desires to consider waiving the sidewalk requirement, we would have to go back and look at those findings that would have to be made, and staff would have to write down what findings were made so we could revise the resolution.
Understood.
Okay?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for making that clear in the staff report.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson?
Sure, thank you. So the drainage easement request, and I'll just read it from Public Works memo, to ensure orderly development of adjacent upland properties, applicant shall provide drainage easements to upstream property owners and/or the county as required by this department. So the idea there is that there's a dedicated place on this property for drainage from upland properties to actually be accommodated for both the existing and any future development that might occur on those properties, so that you don't have a conflict between the property owners when you have maybe potentially additional drainage happening that is going on to somebody else's property with no dedicated place to get back out to the storm drains.
Right.
So that is a pretty standard requirement.
I was just going to say, that's a standard condition. Commissioner Scavadel?
I agree. I think it is a standard condition. I think in this instance, the upland properties are all already developed. I'm not suggesting we remove the condition, because I think the condition as it reads says that as required by the Public Works Department. I doubt they're going to require any drainage easements, since all the parcels uphill as a part of this other subdivision all developed and all already probably drain into other drainage facilities and are not likely to drain down through this property. But I think that condition leaves it up to Public Works to make that determination in the future if they need a drainage easement.
Would agree with that.
Okay, thank you. Well, okay. I think that that spoke pretty well, I thought, to the issues or questions that were raised by the applicant and their agent. So now let's bring it back to the commission. Commissioner Mulder.
So through the chair to staff, I'm back to the sidewalk. Do we have I'm trying to find, and I very well could have missed it, the distance, like how long that sidewalk is.
We could attempt to do a measurement on Google Earth if I can.
Well, just from what I was seeing, it seems like it just goes right past that first gravel driveway on the right, and then that's basically where it dead ends. Is that correct, or am I?
Yeah, it goes past there, and it goes past the last driveway on the left, because at that point, it would only be serving two properties and be considered a driveway at that point.
Okay, so that sidewalk is basically just to get to the fire truck turnaround, and it wouldn't carry down like it. Okay.
That's about correct.
It wouldn't turn the corner.
It's not. There's no potential. Everything I heard, there's no potential of a through-fare sidewalk at any point in time. So it's just a sidewalk that goes to a dead end, turns back. Okay. Can you refresh my memory on the findings we would need to get to waive that requirement?
Yes, and do you want to bring them back up so we can see them? Or I can read them? You can share them if you'd like.
Can I ask another clarifying question on that same topic of the sidewalk?
Sure.
And I was looking for it in here, but did I read somewhere that it's either a 16-foot wide road with this sidewalk, or are we proposing, if we don't put in the sidewalk, the road width be increased to 18 feet?
Let me read the condition the way it reads in Public Works here. Oh, I opened the wrong one. Okay, here we go. So, if the Planning Commission approves the exception request, item number 2.6E in the Public Works condition of approval will be replaced with the following. The Azalea Avenue north of Sutter Road will be constructed having a typical section comprised of one 18-foot wide travel lane. And the access road shall be signed and or striped for no parking. So if you were to waive that, we would do an addition to to the resolution where I would add the findings, and then also Public Works would amend their conditions of approval to reflect what I had stated.
Commissioner Mulder, I believe, has
Just one follow-up. I did hear testimony that under, I think it was like 16411-1, that technically that sidewalk requirement isn't required by law. Is that correct or incorrect?
I'm unaware of that.
So
Sorry.
I think we are unaware of the specific reference to state law. I will say that the requirement comes out of the county's subdivision ordinance, which does say in order to subdivide, you have to have certain category roads. In most cases, and this is one of those cases, it'd be a category 4 road, which subdivision ordinance does identify as a 50-foot wide right-of-way, 2 travel lanes of a certain width with sidewalks.
Okay.
Right.
I'll just state that I'm having a hard time requiring that sidewalk, but I'd like to hear what fellow commissioners say before I go any deeper with that.
Commissioner McFarland.
I just have a clarifying question. So the no parking restriction is only put in place if a sidewalk is built, but if it's left as is, parking is allowed?
It doesn't state that parking is allowed. It does state that if the sidewalk condition is waived, that the access road shall be signed and or striped for no parking.
Yeah, that's a good point. It doesn't make sense to me if the width reduction is granted, the exception to the right-of-ways, and that there's a sidewalk, it doesn't make sense that there would be room for parking. But it's a little bit ambiguous, I guess, in that text, unless it's spoken of somewhere else. My read would be that there's not going to be parking permitted either way.
Maybe I can help with this a little bit. Hopefully I don't make it worse.
Well, yeah.
That whole section on the west side of the parcel, that goes up like this and then comes down and goes towards Sutter, that whole section is a right-of-way. That's a historic right-of-way in the assumption that Azalea Road would at some point connect with I think it's Blackbird Road to the north, which never took place, and that idea at this point has been abandoned. So that whole section is a right-of-way. I believe it's 60 feet at the top and 35 feet at the bottom.
Well, I'll just speak to this briefly about the question of the sidewalks. I mean, I guess I think this one's a sort of in-between case. There's some cases when I really strongly believe there's a strong argument for the public benefit of sidewalks. In other cases, it seems really clear to me that there's not much of a case for that. I think there is some benefit to sidewalks here, although it's not extensive, it's not necessary. Yes, there's some slope to the road, but I certainly don't think there's the slope or the gradient makes it overly difficult to put in a sidewalk, even if there is an ADA ramp. And I got to say that just in general, I feel that I do like to have sidewalks because, one exception begets another exception, and McKinleyville already has too many sort of patchworks with or without sidewalks that are, I feel like we should try to have them consistent in general.
I would just add, I generally agree with everything you just said. Working from home, often go on a lot of walks, and I appreciate sidewalks, and I agree with your view on McKinleyville being a patchwork network. And these lots will be developed in the future, and I think it's speculative to assume that the future residents would not appreciate standard ADA compliance measures that we would normally require on other projects.
Commissioner Kiriazi.
I also agree with both Commissioner Levy and Commissioner McFarland. I think an example would be, I would regret, for example, in years down the road, there's a kid walking back up this road at night to get home, and sidewalks just help alleviate those types of scenarios.
Mhm. Commissioner Mulder.
So it looks like, according to this topo, looks like to about 20 feet of elevation change from the beginning of the sidewalk to where this turnaround. I hear everyone, sidewalks are great. I like walking on sidewalks. I'm just trying to figure out like what that purpose is really going to serve, because it's going to go to this turnaround thing, and there's still 2 partials this way. There's still technically 3 partials off of this other road. So I'm not like the sidewalk's great. Like they're awesome to walk on, but I'm not seeing it fulfill like getting to each partial. So there's still kids walking around this corner, and I'm not saying I want to add sidewalks to it. So but I'm fine if the majority of the commission wants to say leave the sidewalk. I'll go roll with it. It's kind of going to a dead end spot.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely see your point, and I recognize that, but I think getting back to Commissioner Levy's earlier comment about setting precedents for future developments, which we anticipate seeing a fair number of in McKinleyville over the next few years, I think it would be wise to uphold the standard.
Commissioner Scavdall.
I like sidewalks too. So I think the applicant is right. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge to get it in here. I think Commissioner O'Neill saw that as well. I have faith in the engineers to be able to figure it out. I think that you could shift the current driveway a little bit closer to the property line and probably make some room for a sidewalk in there. It's going to be difficult for the sidewalk to completely comply with all the ADA requirements on some of those steeper slopes, so they might need some exceptions for that during the design process. But I think they can fit a sidewalk in there.
Sounds like that was Commissioner Scavdall's motion, is what I heard.
Yes, Commissioner Kiriazi.
I do have one other discussion point, and that is the road apron out onto Sutter. And I personally like to see the distance that pedestrians cross a driveway minimized. So I guess I'm not exactly sure if it would be appropriate to put a condition on here. However, I would not want to see the width of that driveway opening widened substantially, such that pedestrians now have to cross a larger space across that driveway. And that pertains to my question around current urban driveway design standards.
If I can try to help answer that. I think when they refer to current urban driveway design standards, it's going to be a driveway apron in the sidewalk where the ADA piece of the sidewalk actually goes around to the back side of the driveway. I think that's what they're referring to when they say current urban design standards. The width of the driveway is going to be 16 feet, like a 2-car garage driveway, right? Similar to that. I think that's what they're talking about here, not having, this is not showing this turn into a 4-way intersection.
That makes sense. And to clarify, there was a statement of additional easement up the roadway a bit to allow for that, I believe. Yeah. Thank you for that.
That's my understanding.
Yep.
Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. I'd make a motion that we adopt the resolution and we adopt the findings of the staff. I don't need to read the whole thing, right?
I don't think so. If we're recommending it with the conditions, the recommended conditions
That staff's
and
already-
exceptions,
I think we need to honor, our public works when they ask for, us to build out sidewalks and roads. I've been required to do it on projects that I've done. I don't like it, but I have to do it, and that's how we build the infrastructure, so I think we move forward with the recommendations.
Okay. We have a motion by
I'll
Commissioner
second.
O'Neill, seconded by Commissioner McFarland. Any further discussion on that motion? Then all in favor, please say aye. I think a voice vote will do. All in
Aye.
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 Any opposed or abstain? Motion passes unanimously. Sutter parcel map subdivision and special permits are approved as recommended. Let's take a 10-minute break. Sorry, we're a little late getting to that point, and reconvene at 8 o'clock.
Recording in progress.
All right. We are reconvening now, and that brings us to item 3 under public hearings, which is Ridgefield Events, conditional use permit in the Arcata area. I'll just mention that I want to make an ex parte disclosure. I did visit the site at the invitation of Mr. Davies on Monday. Spent about a half an hour there, had a little walk around, answered a few questions, but I don't think it really gave me any information that wasn't in the staff report or other materials that we've all received. Any other ex parte disclosures?
Also did a drive-by.
Okay. Thanks. With that, I would welcome a staff report.
Thank you. And that'll be Max Hilken, remote presentation.
What's that? Oh, yeah, okay.
Max on
Sure.
Zoom. Thank you.
Good evening again, commissioners. My name is Max Hilken with Lego Associates, and I'm presenting the Ridgefield Events conditional use permit for you this evening. The proposed conditional use permit would authorize the use of the property as a seasonal venue for special events, primarily weddings, between April and October. The events would include up to 120 guests per event and a maximum of 30 events per year. A little call out here is elopement events would be scheduled Monday through Thursday. Typically, these events have a guest of participation of 2 to 20. And weddings on Friday through Sunday, typical guest participation would be between 30 and 120 guests. The hours of operation for the events would be between 9:30 a.m. and 9:30 p.m., but guests generally would be on site from 1 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. The potential impacts associated with this conditional use permit for special events is related to the degree to which the events could be disruptive to the community. The venue site is surrounded on 3 sides by timberland. The closest residence to the west is approximately 300 feet away, and there are 3 other residences to the west that are between 565 and 800 feet from the venue location. The relatively limited size of the gatherings and the dispersed nature of the development in the area limits the likelihood of a significant impact on the community. Access to the subject parcel is from Fickle Hill Road, which is paved, county maintained road without pedestrian facilities. The Department of Public Works commented that Fickle Hill Road has a varying width road right of way, but is paved with a painted centerline stripe. According to the Department of Public Works, the road has adequate functional capacity to handle event traffic. This slide is showing the site plan for the proposed project. Events will be centered in the terraced area in front of the existing residence, and portable toilets will be used during events, and on-site parking will be made available as well on-site. Food for events will be provided through off-site catering, as a note. The Planning Department mailed a notice of application on February 16th, 2024 to property owners within 1,000 feet of the property. notifying those owners that the application was being processed and requested comments. The same properties were noticed for tonight's hearing. Between both noticing efforts, the county received approximately 26 comments. The applicant provided a response to comments included in attachment 1D of the staff report. Public comments are included as attachment 4, and additional comments were provided in advance of tonight's hearing. The concerns included noise, traffic, fire risk, water use, wastewater, alcohol use, lighting, and the hours of operation. Many of the concerns described were identified during staff analysis, and conditions of approval were included to address the concerns voiced by the neighborhood. Regarding traffic, as noted previously, the road has adequate functional capacity to handle event traffic as analyzed by the Department of Public Works. Additionally, Department of Public Works recommends conditions of approval to require the applicant to improve the driveway apron at Fickle Hill to commercial standards, ensure visibility at the driveway meets county standards, obtain an encroachment permit for this work, apply for and obtain an annual permit from the Public Works Land Use Office to provide temporary traffic control during each event, which requires the submittal of a traffic control plan prepared by a registered civil engineer or traffic engineer, and provide additional insurance to the county. Additionally, no on-street parking along Fickle Hill Road would be authorized by this permit. In regard to noise, although some events will feature amplified music, the conditions of approval include restrictions on event-related noise requiring that speakers be directed inward and away from the nearest property lines. For water and wastewater concerns, the subject parcel is served by a small water system, a groundwater well, and an on-site wastewater treatment system. However, the use of the on-site water and wastewater treatment system will be minimized. No on-site food preparation is proposed by this permit. Portable toilets with hand washing stations will be provided for each event, and on-site parking will be made available in an area of mowed grass pasture within a secondary overflow parking area, which is designated on site. For hours of operation, the applicant will be required to adhere to the hours of operation provided in the operations plan, which goes from 9:30 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. with guests on site generally between 1 p.m. and no later than 9:30 p.m. For fire danger, according to the operations plan, there is a fire truck turnaround space on the subject parcel, and there is a 30,000 gallon water storage tank. The Arcata, I apologize, that was not a tank, there just is an accumulation of 30,000 gallons of water storage on site. The Arcata Fire Protection District received a project referral and recommended approval of the project. Lighting, recommended condition of approval B5 requires that any exterior lighting associated with the event shall be shielded and directed so as not to extend beyond the boundaries of the parcel. And for garbage and recycling, recommended conditions of approval B4 requires that the applicant shall provide adequate trash receptacles and shall be responsible for cleanup and proper disposal of any litter created by each event. Containers for disposal of recyclable or compostable items shall be provided. Planning staff is recommending that the Planning Commission make the required findings and adopt the resolution approving the conditional use permit for this project. And this concludes my presentation. The applicant is in attendance at tonight's hearing. Planning staff is available for questions. Thank you.
Any initial questions for staff on the staff report? Okay, then let's go to public comment, and I would invite the applicant to begin by making a presentation, and you can have up to 10 minutes for that presentation if you wish.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't need quite that much time. Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to present my project to you this evening. My name is Scott Davies. I have lived in Arcata for 35 years and owned the property that Ridgefield Events is located on for the past 20 years. My first wife and I built this home and raised our 4 children here. And after losing her to cancer, my children and I interred her ashes on this property. I care deeply for this property on a very personal level. Our property also abuts the Arcata Community Forest, which is an incredible asset to our whole neighborhood, as well as my family. And this personal history and connection to the property, combined with the desire to give something back to the Arcata Community Forest led me to the decision to place all of my timberlands, a little more than 75 acres, into a conservation easement, which I gifted with no compensation to the city of Arcata last November. This gift to the city of Arcata is also a gift to my neighborhood, since it protects and preserves the character of my neighborhood in contrast to the noise and road impacts that would have been associated with significant housing development if we had chosen a different path. The conservation easement and Ridgefield events are really complementary pieces of a sustainable business model that's based on celebrating the natural beauty of our area by hosting low-impact events that bring people to Arcata from around our county, our state, and indeed much of the western U.S. My wife Krista and I had our wedding here, and we envision Ridgefield as a place where people can share their love for each other, as we did, surrounded by stunning natural beauty. As a proof of concept test, we launched our website to see what kind of demand there might be for our venue. In the first 30-day period, we received 87 inquiries from places as far away as Alaska, Iowa, Texas, Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, Los Angeles, Sacramento, to name a few. People want to visit our region to see the redwoods, to get married in the redwoods. And when they come here, they spend a considerable amount of money in our local hotels, restaurants, retail stores, etc. The total impact on the local economy for a single destination wedding at Ridgefield is measured in the tens of thousands of dollars. Additionally, our Ridgefield vendor family is made up entirely of women-owned local small businesses, from flowers to photography, catering to mobile bars, rentals to restrooms, insurance to desserts. Our local vendor partners greatly benefit from the revenue that Ridgefield brings to our county. Each event at Ridgefield employs more than 40 people associated with these local businesses. Humboldt County needs more businesses like Ridgefield that are not based on resource extraction, but on celebrating our incredible natural resources and sharing them with the wider world. We have been hosting events at Ridgefield informally for friends and family for 17 years. Throughout that time, we have never had issues with noise, traffic issues associated with Fickle Hill Road, or our on-site parking. This track record speaks to the success of our operations plan and the appropriateness of Ridgefield as a venue location. It's also why our closest and longest standing neighbors have written to support our project. Those who have known us the longest and who are in closest proximity to our event space all support our project. With our current operations plan, we've taken a closer look at the three main areas of impact associated with our events and looked for ways which we can continue to improve. First, I'll just hit water use. Events at Ridgefield now have almost zero impact on our water supply. All of our catering and food prep is done off-site and is brought to Ridgefield ready to serve. Our restrooms are trailered in. They arrive with their own water supply for flushing and hand washing and are hauled away afterwards. All of our dishes arrive from rental companies who then, after events, take them away to be washed off-site at commercial facilities, and in each case, the water usage is off-site. Water use at Ridgefield is limited to hand washing for the catering team and is less than 10 gallons per event. Road impacts. Ridgefield is located 1 mile from Arcata. This is a drive that takes approximately 2 minutes from the city border and also regularly accommodates logging trucks. Getting cars safely in and out of our event space has never been an issue for us. We've added new signage to increase our visibility at Fickle Hill Road so guests know precisely where to turn, and we have ample parking in our event area. Additionally, Our driveway was widened, regraded, and rocked this past September to accommodate the habitat restoration timber harvest that we conducted with the city's forestry team. Driver safety is also connected to alcohol use, which is why we have strict prohibitions against any outside alcohol at our events and hire only experienced and licensed bartending staff to manage alcohol. This is a requirement of our liability insurance and something we are adamant about. For out-of-town guests, or when dictated by event size, we have relationships with local hotels, cab companies, and private agencies, all of whom can provide shuttles for guests coming to Ridgefield, thereby reducing traffic and increasing guest safety. Last, I want to talk about noise. Noise impacts on our neighborhood have always been an important factor for us. It's why we made the decision to mandate that any amplified music must stop earlier than the noise ordinance for the county or the city of Arcata. It's why we focus on smaller and diverse types of events that don't involve amplified music, elopements, micro weddings, corporate picnics, off-campus department meetings for Cal Poly Humboldt, Rotary fundraisers, to name a few. Additionally, Ridgefield sits in a soundscape that is already busy with noise. Commercial logging is all around us, from the Arcata Community Forest to the McAdam and Green Diamond timber properties. Commercial logging is part of the sounds we live with in our neighborhood. We hear traffic noise from highways 101 and 299 24 hours a day. We're also directly underneath the final approach to the Eureka Arcata Regional Airport, where planes pass at a very low altitude just minutes from landing. Another factor is that since we are on a ridge, sounds are audible in our neighborhood from as far away as Blue Lake music festivals to the east of us, or Crabs games and marching lumberjacks in Arcata to the west. We are 1 mile from the city of Arcata and Cal Poly Humboldt, and there is noise all around us. We are not located in the far-off mountains of Humboldt. However, the single most important thing I can share with you about noise is that each of the neighbors who are the closest to my event space, whose property directly abuts my property, have all written to support our project. In closing, the impacts from our event space are in compliance with county requirements and are well managed, as evidenced by our track record, the staff report, and our neighbors' support. The majority of my neighbors have written to support the project. Ridgefield also enjoys the support of Arcata City Manager Karen Deemer, Arcata Mayor and Chamber of Commerce President Meredith Matthews, City Council members, and the more than a dozen small locally owned businesses who directly benefit from Ridgefield and who have written you as well in support of this project. Given all this, I ask the Commission to follow the recommendation of County Planning staff and support our project. Thank you.
Thank you so
Happy
much.
to answer questions afterwards.
Are there any initial questions at this time for the applicant? If something comes up later, we can ask later. Yes, Commissioner Curriasi.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. I just had a quick question regarding a late submitted public comment regarding a shared driveway. Is that correct, that the initial entrance is shared?
There are two driveways that are parallel to each other. One is the driveway that serves Ridgefield. There's a parallel driveway to it that my parents live on. But there's a long-standing connection between these two driveways that goes back decades, longer than the 20 years that I've owned it. We recently, because of the timber restoration, the habitat restoration timber project we did with the city of Arcata, we rocked that connection to improve it and make sure that the heavy equipment wouldn't cut loose any soil and create any downstream issues. But that connection is not at all part of Ridgefield.
Mm-hmm. So just to be clear, the driveway that is the entrance to the Ridgefield event property, the main driveway, doesn't serve any other neighbor?
Correct.
Right, that's what I
Yep,
thought.
it comes only to me. We have traffic people at both ends of the driveway to make sure there's no, cars that meet. We have a turnout at the top of our driveway wide enough for a full-size truck to get off the road. Again, because we've had commercial logging, and we've had the fire department up, the driveway is big enough to handle, 80,000-pound logging equipment. It's not a tight, narrow driveway. It's big enough for full-size equipment. And additionally, we have, part of the reason why the fire district supported us is that we have a water sharing agreement with them. They use our property to get water and fought a fire just uphill from us in the last 6 months successfully because they were able to get water off our property. So access is not an issue for us, for fire, for full-size trucks, and certainly not for the cars that attend our events.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just clarify if the proposed parking area, do you plan on paving that in the future? And have you seen any evidence of wetlands or anything out there, or is you going to leave it grass?
We had an extensive biological survey before being able to finalize the conservation easement that we gifted to the Arcata, so it's not a wetland area at all. I haven't considered paving it just because I think it's important to allow the rainwater to penetrate because we're only operating in the drier months. We've never had a problem. We are on a ridge, so the property drains. My driveway is the watershed divide between the Kelly Creek drainage, which flows to the east, and the Jolly Giant Creek drainage, which flows to the west into Arcata. So we have really great drainage on our site, and it's never been a problem.
I think you've tapped into something that I've been thinking about for a long time, and that's the wedding industry. And I think that, we do need to promote more of that. Thank you.
I do just want to make sure that we don't, we're still in public comment, so, and I appreciate the answers to our questions, but is there anyone else in the room, okay, you have a question for okay.
So in public comment, Phyllis, I think was the name, made comments that there's water trucks going up the road, and I heard in your testimony that there's logging operations that happen off the road. So is it a true statement that those water trucks that have been seen on that road are facilitating logging operations and not bringing water to your site?
I think historically there's a lot of properties on Fickle Hill Road that don't have good access to water, and I too see water trucks going up and down the hill regularly. However, on my property, I have a well that only serves my house, but my property also houses Crestview Water System, which is a water system that serves 6 other homes on Fickle Hill. It's a really great water system. It's never run out of water in the 40-plus years of its existence. All of the members of Crestview were excited about this project, especially the conservation easement, because it protected the watershed that their water is in from any future development. We've lived together as neighbors for a couple decades, and many of them have written in to support Ridgefield as well.
Thank you for that.
Thanks. Thank you. We may have other questions, but I do just want to continue with public comment and see if there's anybody else who wishes to comment. Anybody else in the room wishing to comment on this project? Yes, go ahead. Each of you can come up and have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Andrew Bozzella. I've submitted a number of comments. One of them was the late comment that you referenced, and actually, as of this morning, I confirmed with Max that indeed that driveway will not be used for the event, so I retract those concerns. My wife and I recently purchased the house and property at 2236 Fickle Hill Road, and I'm speaking in opposition to this proposal. The staff report notes that our home is approximately 565 feet to the west of the venue location. There is a mostly open field between our house and the venue. In discussions with our neighbor, Scott Davies, we were told that events were being held on his property, but we were unpleasantly surprised by the scale of the Ridgefield events proposal when it became public. Our greatest concern is noise pollution from large outdoor events of up to 120 guests with amplified speeches and music. We were present during one event last year when even inside our home, the experience was that of being too close to a music festival. Our neighbors who are slightly more distant and better shielded reported similar complaints in their written public comments. These larger events will be in the minority, but may still result in a dozen weekend days during the spring and summer where from 1 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. we are unable to enjoy the use of our property and perhaps even unable to escape the noise indoors. Of lesser concern, but still relevant, is our property value. Scott has commented that he believes this event venue will increase property values, nearby property values. Respectfully, we disagree. Oops, sorry about that. While we expect and hope to spend many years in our new home, our understanding is that now that we have been notified of the wedding venue, we are required to disclose its existence to prospective buyers. This requirement exists to prevent unpleasant surprises like this, and will certainly give pause to a potential buyer who, like us, is not excited about living this close to frequent large events with amplified sound. Scott has been a generous and welcoming neighbor to us, but there are differences between a neighbor and a business. There are no benefits here for us, only costs. If this proposal is approved, I would ask you to consider how many events of this nature and size would be appropriate if the venue were 200 yards from your homes, and to consider additional conditions limiting the number of events with amplified outdoor music. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dave White, and I'm actually Andrew's neighbor immediately to the west. I'm not quite as close. We purchased our property up on Fickle Hill approximately 40 years ago, built our own house, and one of the reasons, and along with many of our neighbors, is to get out of town, out of the hustle and bustle, and out of the noise. And while there are some noises up there, I've not heard logging operations up there in a long time, so it's not something that we hear all the time. We like to sit out on the deck in the afternoon and enjoy, sitting in the redwoods, having a nice time, maybe having a barbecue, having a few friends over. Having to listen to somebody's loud music will greatly disturb that. As Andrew mentioned, I'm going to skip a lot of my stuff because he covered most of it, but they did have an event last year that was extremely loud. You couldn't escape it by going in the house. It certainly was very disturbing outside, and one of my neighbors actually recorded it, and I wish there was a way we could play that for you. It was extremely loud. I do not object to small events, the ones I know he's had some, not aware of it, but the large events with the amplified music, specifically live bands or DJs, are a problem, and that needs to be addressed. I don't think the staff report adequately addresses it. They talk about turning the speakers inward. I'm sure that will help some. But in looking at the County General Plan noise element, one of the tables, Table 13C, states that 60 decibels A scale is the upper level of normally acceptable noise. After that, it becomes normally unacceptable, and this is usually taken at the property line. What I would ask that you consider is adding conditions, one, to limit the sound level to a maximum 60 dBA at nearby residentially zoned properties, which would include mine, it would include Andrew's. I think the ones immediately adjacent to him are zoned ag, and they have a higher level. But those of us that are in the next row are zoned residential. I also asked that a condition be added that the noise levels at his property line do not exceed the levels in section I think it's S7 for timber preserve zone, which is what his property is zoned, which are 70 to 80 dBA. Okay, thank you. I'm hoping that Mr. Davies is willing to be helpful if it becomes a problem. I've never talked to him. I had no contact with him, and I guess I'm out of time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else in the room wishing to comment on this project? Seeing none, I will close in-person public comment, although I will bring it back to the applicant at the end if he wishes. I do see one hand up on Zoom, so we'll go now to Zoom and phone public comment. Kevin O'Brien, Go ahead. You can have up to 3 minutes. *6, or yeah, unmute the button. Yes, there you go. You're still muted. There you go.
There. All right, great. Thank you. Yes, this is Kevin O'Brien. I'm current chair of the Crestview Water Company, a small water company that provides water system for 7 households, including Mr. Davies, for residential use. Mr. Davies has discussed this project at length with our board members verbally, and has addressed it in writing. We actually feel quite comfortable with his plan, which is a separation of water systems. In other words, Crestview Water Company, which is designed for 7 residential households, is not used for his business plans. I agree with what his plan has in store. We would like to see something in either the staff report or conditions of approval, or something, maybe even required exemptions that address the issue of separation of the water systems and sources. And with that, I will let it go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else on phone or Zoom who wishes to comment on this project, Ridgeview Events? Seeing none, I will close public comment, but bring it back to the applicant. We always give the applicant 3 minutes at the end to respond to other concerns or comments that have been made.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. First of all, while our event time lasts from 1 till 9:30, there's not music that whole time. Music often doesn't start till 6:30 or 7 at night. The early parts are planning, there's ceremonies, so amplified music is not occurring at many of the events, and the ones it does occur at is not anywhere near that whole time period, so I just want to clarify that. Also, as far as property values, it is my opinion that us preserving our lands in a conservation easement is a net benefit to everyone in our neighborhood, and it does support property values because it has prevented extensive development that could have happened on an 80-acre parcel that is 2 miles from downtown Arcata and Cal Poly Humboldt. So I just wanted to say that. And regarding Crestview, the conservation easement that we signed with the city, giving them these forested lands, specifically call out Crestview and any impacts that could occur on Crestview. That was part of the appeal for us because we use the water as well as our neighbors who get water from our property. So I just wanted to clarify those and see if there was any additional questions.
Yeah, and now would be the time if there are additional questions for Mr. Davies. Go ahead.
So if it turns out that, you know, the music is too loud, because I could understand if I go to bed at 9 sometimes, so, you know, if someone's playing really loud amplified music, it could be annoying. Is there any way that, you know, we have good neighbor policies on other rentals and stuff that we do locally, that your neighbors could notify you and you would address that issue, maybe turn it down, or, I mean, I've been to a lot of weddings where they don't even have loud music. They might play, you know, when the bride walks down the aisle.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think it's a fair question. I will say in 17 years that we received 2 calls for sound. One was a neighbor that could hear the music festival in Blue Lake coming through our property, and the other time was from Crabs and the Marching Lumberjacks in Arcata. I appreciate the public comment process, and for me it led personally to a number of really great conversations with my neighbors. And you know, my cell phone number, I walked around my neighborhood, put letters in mailboxes, and did everything I could to generate conversation.
What I'm getting at is in the future, you have 2 neighbors that have, you know, live close by that say it could be a potential, it may not be a problem, but it could be, and that you would be receptive if they were to contact you and say, hey, you know, we can't continue this level.
I have been and will remain open to communications and making it work for my neighbors as well as I can. I will say that we, you know, for us, I feel like we're already stopping music earlier than the sound ordinance would require out of respect for our neighbors. And there's, but, you know, that said, I'm always available and open for conversations about how anything that we're doing can work as well as it can for our neighborhood. And again, the neighbors that are closest to us that would have the biggest impact from the noise and who are familiar with our events are supportive of our project. And I feel like that says a lot about how we've conducted our events.
Yeah, I'm just talking about the ones that aren't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Commissioner McFarland.
Can you just respond to the proposal from the public comment period about setting a decibel limit in the 70 to 80 range?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I'm willing to do anything that I can to make the minimal, you know, noise impact that we have work as well as it can for the neighbors, whether that be, you know, looking at shrouding the sound equipment in a different way as well as pointing it, you know, directionally. Happy to explore any of those options, and including in, you know, investing anything that we can do to minimize those impacts. Absolutely.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Davies while he's still at the podium? Okay, thank you so much. And if something comes up, we may call you back up. So just on the noise issue, one of the speakers spoke to the noise element of the general plan and essentially asking that we condition the project to comply with that. Does that noise element under the general plan have the force of law in this case? Is there a purpose served by adding conditions that say it must comply with those standards?
So that is more of a compatibility chart than an ordinance regulation.
Right.
That chart also includes language that special events are not regulated under this, and that the noise levels will be determined by a conditional use permit approved by the Planning Commission.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Commissioner Curriasi.
To the staff, I know we've imposed decibel requirements, I think, on cannabis operations. I'm just curious if that is something that it has been done on projects like this. Is that even reasonable on projects like this?
It can be. And, you know, one of the things that gets difficult is it's important to identify where you're measuring from. So say the perimeter of the property would be a very definable place. You know, sometimes there's a desire to make sure the interior noise level within somebody else's house or something, and that gets a little extreme.
Mm-hmm. Other thoughts?
It seemed to me that the areas that we're concerned about noise are the residences either along Fickle Hill Road or across Fickle Hill Road from the property. And then there's another street, name escapes me, that some residents commented.
Inga, I think.
Inga.
Yeah.
It's just, so it's kind of some residential pockets. I don't know if there's something we could do to impose some, you know, noise limit or restriction at some boundary around the property. It seems to me that given the area, the location of the venue, that it should be manageable, if you will, that the properly planned events and with some guidelines, they should be able to manage the noise disturbance off the property so that the neighbors aren't impacted. And I'm just trying to figure out how, or if we can condition it to ensure that that does happen. I think it would be a benefit to both the venue itself to not have complaints from around the neighborhood, and also an assurance to some of the property owners in the neighborhood that we're not permitting a project that is going to create future problems or complaints for the county or the venue operator. Just not, do we set a decibel limit at the property boundary or at Fickle Hill Road, or?
Also, if you advise your clients that are coming in that there is a noise restriction and that there are certain rules they have to follow, if you properly supervise your event so that, there's someone on site that can say, wait a minute, we got to turn it down. Those could also be part of their policies when they accept a
I'm just not. I'm not a noise expert to can say, well, what should that limit be, or how do you manage that? I would look to staff or somebody to help us figure that out.
Okay, Commissioner Mulder, and then maybe we can see if staff has any additional insight.
So on the same line, say we set a decibel limit, say 90 decibels, with this throwing out a number that hasn't been used yet. And there's a complaint. Let's say, the music turns off at 9:30. So say a complaint 8:30 at night, the music's too loud or whatever. How do we verify that it's past that without imposing, like, where they have to have noise things out on property lines? And that seems, I feel like a little excessive to have the monitoring out there. So I've heard this term noise is always, everyone has a different definition of what's tolerable or what's too loud. So I just want to make sure if we do put something in place that there's a way to verify that, and I don't know how you verify that with, I don't know.
Through the chair, if I could. I was thinking about that as Commissioner Scavsdall was speaking, and one of the issues is that oftentimes, even if you set a noise limit, that the complaints come in after the fact. So the violations already occurred. So one of the things that, if you recall, we did with the short-term rental ordinance is that if there are complaints, then the noise has to be monitored. So if you're going to have amplified events and you have one or more, the number is going to be subjective. But complaints, then from then on out, you have to have a monitoring device on site to demonstrate what the noise levels are.
That does seem reasonable because, as the applicant notes, there is a track record here of having had, even though it was not in through this commercial permitted, there have been a history of events over the years, I understand, of this property. So it feels a little bit excessive to impose that requirement up front, but I also do not want to leave the applicant or the neighbors, the concerned neighbors, with no recourse if it proves to be an issue. So are you suggesting, Director Ford, that we might essentially draft a contingent condition in a way that would say something like what you just said? If there are some number of complaints, that we would then impose a new condition to measure and mitigate sound.
The condition would be that if there's a certain number of complaints, then any event with amplified music after that must have a noise monitor on site, and the noise cannot exceed 80 decibels, whatever it is.
At property line.
At the property line.
Yeah. Yes, sir, Mr. Davies.
Yeah, I didn't want to get too deep into our operations plan, but one of the things that we're doing, which is different than any other venue in Humboldt County, it's common in other areas, is we're an all-inclusive venue. So we always have the same vendor team. And the reason why we're doing that, and there's an extraordinary amount of extra work to assemble that team, is so that we can control the quality of our events across all of our vendor categories, flower, food, dessert, so that there's no uneven experiences for guests. But in this case, we'll always be working with the same DJ and our in-house sound equipment, so it's going to be much easier for us to do the kind of noise monitoring and keep track of things ahead of time in a proactive way, because we're not going to have a sort of rolling cast of performers, as it were. So
makes sense.
That's certainly acceptable from our perspective.
Okay. Commissioner Mulder, do you want to? Thank you.
Would it be, through the chair to staff, would it be reasonable to have a condition, I guess, with if there's more than 2 noise complaints in a 12-month period, then monitoring devices would be at the property line with not to exceed 80 decibels? Is that what I heard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's reasonable, but we should either allow staff some discretion to decide if it's 80 or 90. Just kind of looking up decibel charts, it looks like 80 is a classroom lecture, loud radio. 90 is inside of a heavy truck, so that I think that might be appropriate for wedding. And then 100 gets to a siren, so that might be excessive. But I don't want to commit to the 80.
But remember, it's logarithmic, right? So.
Right, and that's why the 90, but
Yeah.
definitely not the 100.
Yeah, yeah. Commissioner West.
I think I'd actually like to lean closer to 80 at the property line personally. If even classroom noise levels like at your property line is pretty loud, that's not like granted like at the event itself, it's at the property line. Director Ford, did we put a decimal limit on short-term rentals?
I think we did.
I think we did.
And an evening cutoff, too.
Yeah.
And I'll just clarify, this was just from a quick Google search, so I'm not saying it should be 90, or I'm just saying I think we should leave the actual number for staff to research and decide after.
I would agree with that, actually, if other commissioners are okay with that.
I was going to propose the same thing.
Okay.
So it would, in the condition would be with the decibel limit to be determined by staff in the range of 80 to 90 decibels.
Or appropriate, appropriate.
I'm just making sure we throw out and they don't come back and if we set the target it's between 80 and 90, so that way it doesn't come back in between 40 and 50 or between 100 and
Right. I think that's
120.
reasonable.
Okay.
Director Ford?
So one of the important things about writing a condition and not just deferring it to staff discretion, while I don't necessarily have a problem with that, the thing is that for the applicant or for the neighbors, they don't know what the expectation is. And so one of two things could come out of that. One is that we'd end up with an appeal because they don't know what the expectation is. Number two, we could be in a situation down the road where we're doing our best to balance the ambient noise on a given day of the week and trying to decide what the noise should be. And the neighbors feel like we're being too generous or the applicant's feeling like we're being far too conservative. And I don't want to put you in a situation where you have to make what you feel is an uninformed, difficult decision. But I think that you are dealing a little bit here with a circumstance that you're trying to protect a residential area. And so trying to define not what would be acceptable from a concert venue, but trying to decide what would be acceptable for that area is really kind of the thought process. And like you mentioned, noise is logarithmic, and so by the time you get to a property line, it's already reduced by quite a bit. And then by the time it travels the other 150 feet to the first residence, you know, it's gone down a lot more. And then by the time it gets over to the residence where one of the members of the community spoke, you know, it will have gone down substantially. So I would ask you to weigh those things and then choose a number.
Commissioner West.
From what I'm finding in the adopted short-term rental ordinance, it looks like noise was 65 decibels during the hours of 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. and 60 decibels from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. Just as a comparison for what we've done in the past.
Commissioner Curriasi.
That, if, yeah, in light of Director Ford's comments, if we're going to specify decibels, I would lean towards the direction that Commissioner West indicated, and I also want to note that at 85 decibels and above, there are actual health exposure limit numbers that start to come into play. So I would err on the side of what was specified in the short-term rental.
If I could, and I didn't intend for it to go quite that far, because the short-term rental ordinance
exactly
was written to ensure that there were not events.
Right.
And so that was that number was chosen to ensure that there wasn't anything going on the property that was noise producing.
You were sleeping.
Because it could be rented night after night all year round.
Right.
Right.
And so this is, and the other thing that the short-term rental ordinance was written to take into account is that many of those properties are very small.
Right.
So the houses are, you know, they could be as close as 10 feet apart. And so it's a far different circumstance than your closest residence being 300 feet away and then 600 feet away.
400 feet, I think, is the closest, if I am understanding correctly. So, yeah, I think they are different situations, and I share your concern about that. Correct, Commissioner Mulder.
So, thank you, Director. I was going to, some of those same things where that short-term rental ordinance, there was houses like right next to each other and we didn't want events. So I agree with that. And this is a special circumstance with events. I hear two commissioners kind of concerned about a number above 80. So I'm just going to say I'd be okay with 80 at the property line if we can get to a consensus and with that modified condition of approval. I think that's appropriate for an event. If that was day in and day out, I don't think that would be appropriate.
Okay, I agree.
I think 80 seems reasonable.
Anyone want to make a motion? Oh, yes, Commissioner West.
I'd be more comfortable in the 75, 70 range, but I could support 80. It's not over 80.
I think 80 at the property line at Fickle Hill Road is appropriate. I'm a little concerned that it might be difficult for the properties right along the west boundary that are relatively close, and those are the neighbors that actually are supportive of the project. So that's my only qualm about this, but I would support 80.
One of the commenters or public comment had suggested having different sound levels on different boundaries of the property, a lower one on the west. I don't know, just throwing that out there, that could be potential, maybe to staff. Does that seem reasonable in terms of an enforcement perspective?
You know, I would, through the chair, if I could, I would almost pick up on something Commissioner Scavdall is saying, is the western property line really is the issue. And one of the concerns that I would have about being too precise with Fickle Hill Road is that you're going to get a lot of ambient noise there too. And so you'll be picking up both event noise and ambient noise from the road. So if if I could offer, the condition really would be along the western property line.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. That would be where the monitoring, if the complaints were to occur, that's where we would set monitoring requirements at that level of.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Does this seem like we have something close to consensus? Anyone care to test that theory?
I'm gonna go try and make a motion to adopt the resolution, which says the following: finds that the proposed project complies with general plan and zoning ordinance, and finds the project exempt from further environmental review to pursuant to section 15301 existing facilities and 15304 minor alterations to land and state CEQA guidelines. There is no substantial evidence that the project will have a significant effect on the environment, and approves the Ridgefield Events conditional use permit subject to the conditions of approval, attachment 1A, with the added condition of approval in the event that there's more than 2 noise complaints in a 12-month period. Monitoring devices shall be placed on the western property boundary with a decibel limit of 80 decibels at the property boundary.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Mulder, seconded by Commissioner O'Neill. Is there any further discussion before we vote on that? All in favor? I guess we could have a voice vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstain? Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, that does bring us now finally to the item which was pulled from consent and not otherwise handled, which is the Garberville Sanitary District General Plan Conformance Review and Special Permits. Yeah, I think I've been a little inconsistent, but I would welcome any ex parte disclosures now at this time on this item.
In the spirit of full transparency, I wanted to disclose that I, 5-6 years ago, worked for a consulting company that did local agency formation commission staff reports, and through that, Garberville Sanitary District did several applications, so I'm familiar with the applicant in that way. I don't believe it gives me any special knowledge, and it's frankly been so long that I don't remember a whole lot. And then in addition to that, I also used to be employed at the applicant's agent's company, SHN, but I did not work on a project regarding the Garberville Sanitary District during that time.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other ex parte disclosures? I would have been curious to actually visit the site, but I did not get to do that on this one. So, okay, so is it Mr. Hilken again? Okay, well, thanks. You guys make a great pair. Go ahead, Mr. Hilken. Whenever you're ready, you can share your screen.
Thank you, Commissioner Levy. Good evening, Commissioners. As you know, my name is Max Hilken. I'm with Lake Associates, and I'm presenting the Garberville Sanitary District Water System Improvements Project. The project includes a general plan conformance review and a special permit for development within the streamside management area. A report on conformance with the general plan is required when a local agency acts to acquire or dispose of real property or intends to construct a new public building or structure. Also, review of public works projects is required by the general plan. The applicable code is included as attachment 4 to the staff report. The proposed use is consistent with the provision of the public services for the Garberville community. This project will supplement the district's existing water storage capabilities, increasing existing storage from 400,000 gallons by an additional 427,000 gallons to decrease reliance on water diversion during low flow months and meet fire protection requirements. The proposed uses conform to the primary or compatible uses described in the affected land use designations. This slide is showing the sites planned for the proposed project and the locations of the 6 sites where improvements would occur in and around the community of Garberville. The project includes replacement of 2 water storage tanks with new tanks, removal of 1 failing water storage tank, replacement of 2 pump stations, an upgrade of 1 pump station, and the installation of new segments of distribution piping to connect the new tanks and pump stations to the existing distribution system. The proposed project also includes installation of 4 backup generators, instrumentation, controls, and radio telemetry improvements associated with this project. These proposed project elements are described in further detail as provided by the project description included as attachment 2A in the staff report. A special permit is required for work proposed within the streamside management area on APN 032-211-021 for development of the access road and ground disturbances to install water lines to the new main tank. Development within the streamside management area would be limited to the encroachment into the 50-foot buffer of the ephemeral stream on before referenced APN and would be less than 538 feet. Development within the SMA is subject to mitigation measures in the ISMND related to biological and geological resources, including use of perimeter control, best management practices such as silt fences or straw wattles placed at the edge of surface water features to intercept sediment before it reaches the waterway. The applicant has a final stream bed alteration agreement with CDFW in progress. Conditions of approval require the applicant to obtain all federal, state, and local permits required for the project. Planning staff believes the mitigation measures as adopted by the district and adhering to conditions of approval would ensure impacts to the SMA are minimized. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the special permit. The county is defined as a responsible agency by CEQA, and the district is the lead agency. The final initial study, checklist, and proposed mitigated negative declaration was adopted by the district on December 19th, 2023, and is included as attachment 3 of the staff report. As lead agency, the district found the project has less than significant impact on the environment with mitigation incorporated. There are 12 mitigation measures for the following environmental factors: aesthetics, biological resources, cultural resources, geology, and noise. Planning staff concurs with the evaluation by the district and does not recommend any further evaluation or mitigation. The applicant is requesting revisions to the resolution to include conveyance of an easement on APN 223-183-003 to the district associated with a new Alder Point pump station as shown on the slide. And that's the bold language there on the slide for you. The applicant is also requesting a modification to condition of approval number 3. This is to add the words "as applicable" and remove the language requiring building permits for demolition and construction as shown on the slide. As a local agency, the district is exempt from building permits pursuant to Government Code 53091. Planning staff believes the revised resolution and proposed revisions to the conditions of approval do not change the findings and recommendations for this project. The public expressed concerns about drainage on the private drive that the district uses to access the wall and tank, and states that a culvert is needed to control drainage at the point where the paved drive ends. Additionally, comments were made concerning the installation of generators and fuel tanks, stating that 0 studies or mitigation measures concerning noise, exhaust fumes, and groundboard vibrations were performed. In regard to the drainage on the private drive, planning staff believes that any disagreements between the property owner and the GSD, or the district, on this access maintenance are primarily a civil issue that is unrelated to the general plan conformance review of this project and the special permit. This public comment appears to have facilitated dialogue between the district and the property owner, which may actually go a ways to helping them resolve these concerns amongst themselves. In regard to the concerns related to the generator impacts, the impacts associated with the project were evaluated under the final initial study and mitigated negative declaration, of which the district board found the analysis acceptable. Planning staff concurs with the evaluation by the district and does not recommend any further evaluation or mitigation. Planning staff is recommending the Planning Commission make the required findings and adopt the resolution approving the general plan conformance review and the special permit. This concludes my presentation. The agent and applicant are in attendance at tonight's hearing, and planning staff is available for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, are there any initial comments for the staff before we go to public comment and invite the applicant to make a presentation? Yes, Commissioner Mulder.
Through the chair to staff, in regards to generators, they, even though they're a governmental agency, they would be required to follow the same CUPA guidelines with environmental health. Is that correct?
That is correct. And one other thing just to point out is that the generators, our understanding is that they are, there are generators there currently that are used for emergency backup purposes only. The PG&E provides power. And so these are new diesel generators that will replace the existing ones. But you are correct about the requirements.
Okay, thank you.
And just want to underscore what you just said. These are replacing the backup generators. They will still be only used as backup power source in the event of PG&E outage, correct?
That is how that is correct.
For the pump stations, yeah, thank you. Okay. Commissioner Kyriazi.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair to staff, I was curious, I didn't quite catch the conveyance edit or alteration. Can you bring that slide up again? Or perhaps maybe just summarize quickly what that requested change means.
Conveyance or conditions?
No, it was.
It's conveyance. I think
Oh, sorry.
what they're trying to do is just indicate that there will be a conveyance, and that's also consistent with the general plan.
Thank you.
I've
Um,
brought it
the-
up to screen for your review.
Oh, thank you. And the revision, we had stated one area where the conveyance was going to occur for the main tank, but had not included the other conveyance for the Alder Point pump stations. We just want to make sure that both of those were mentioned.
I
in
got it.
Resolution item 5D. So it's just the sentence there in bold that would be added.
I see, yes, yes. Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
Thank you.
Thanks for that question. Yes, Commissioner Scabdell?
Just another comment. I appreciate that the district may be exempt from the building permit process, and I'm fine with the revised wording, but I'll just, point of advice to the applicant is that PG&E will not connect to the electrical service without a building official tag on the electrical box, so they're going to need to get a building permit to do that.
Okay. Me either. Okay, if there's no other questions for staff at this time, and we may have others later, but I believe you are the applicant, project manager or general manager.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I really appreciate you guys hearing our item tonight and not continuing it, even though it's late tonight. My name is Jenny Short. I am the Garberville Sanitary District Project Manager for this tank replacement project. The 3 tanks that we are replacing have served the residents of Garberville for a very long time, as many as 100 years for one of them. They're very old, they've been leaking, and they've been needing to be replaced for decades. Garberville is designated as a severely disadvantaged financial community, and so our water rates are currently $90 a month for a base rate. It's higher than almost anywhere in Humboldt County. And so it wasn't as simple as just saying, okay, we're going to replace the tanks. We have many customers that have difficulty in just paying their water rate every single month. And so I've spent the last 10 years or so applying for various grants to try to obtain funding for this project so that we could complete it. During those years, unfortunately, while we were looking for funding, the cracks in the tank have continued to become larger, and the amount of the water that's leaking onto the surrounding ground has continued to grow. The district's water source is a diversion directly from the South Fork of the Eel River, which is a wild and scenic river, and it's also home to numerous listed species. So while continuing to supply water to the residents of Garberville, we've also continued to divert water from the river through the treatment process, pumped it to the tanks, all to only have some of it leak back out onto the ground. The grant that the district eventually received was from the Department of Water Resources Small Community Drought Relief Program. That program's target is projects just like this one, with the goal of minimizing the amount of water withdrawn from the rivers during drought conditions. With the replacement of these leaking tanks, it will allow the district to decrease the quantity of water that's diverted from the river and leave more of this precious liquid resource for the fish and aquatic species that need it to survive the hot summers in southern Humboldt. It's taken a great deal of hard work by many people and agencies to get to this milestone in the project. The project is scheduled to go out to bid at the end of April. Part of the reason I appreciate you guys hearing it today. And we're really looking forward to having this final permit issued by you guys tonight. It's been a real pleasure to work with the county's consultant staff throughout this process. And just so you guys know, this project contains a lot of sites that are spread out all across the district with different elements at each one of them. And they've really done an excellent job in your staff report and the documents they provided to you in trying to capture all of that and present to you a cohesive plan for what to do for this project. So I am available to answer questions. I would like to have an opportunity to comment if you choose to add any conditions to the proposed conditions. But otherwise, I'd be glad to answer questions if you have any.
Certainly. Well, we could have a quick initial question now. We also will give you the chance to come back up once we've completed public comment and see if there's any other comments. But did you want to ask something now?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for your public service, and I know grants aren't easy to get. Moving along quickly, you did mention in your response to the comment that was submitted about the culvert issue, you mentioned that the district would be willing to pay their fair share, but in the absence of a road maintenance authority or group, what is that fair share? What does that come to? What does that mean?
Well, generally the way that we approach other property owners is we look at, okay, we go up there once a week to check the tank, and they go to their house, once or twice a day. And some of it just depends on how many people are there. It really is on a voluntary basis, and is part of the reason that we don't appear to have made any traction in that. The general manager at the district had been talking to Scott Carmichael, who is the one that put the comment forward. I think the hope is the district will just cover it all, but we have a limited grant here, and already our estimate is higher than what that is. And so adding elements to the project that are not a necessary part of the project isn't something that's viable for us. And like I said in my response, one of the things that's critical for us is we've completed CEQA on a footprint. And going outside of that footprint is a problem for us when we're using state funding and federal funding for the project. And so we're happy to do repairs anywhere that we're doing water line. We're happy to do repairs places where the contractor damages the road. We will require him to go out and repair those damages. But just picking and choosing culverts where they want to make alterations to how the drainage works is not something the district can facilitate at this point.
Okay. Thank you. I do see that Mr. Carmichael is on Zoom, so I will thank you that, and I just want to acknowledge that you came a long way and waited a long time for us to get to this item, so we apologize that it is so late.
That was all right. Thank you.
Okay, so let's go to other public comment. Is there anyone else in the room wishing to comment on this item? I'm looking at you, sir. Oh. Okay. Then we do have a couple people still left on Zoom and phone. Would anyone on Zoom or phone wish to comment on the item at this time? I see a hand up for Scott and Deb Carmichael. Go ahead, sir. You have 3 minutes.
All right. Thank you for hearing us out, and I appreciate and I'm actually sorry that this has to come to this. I understand the need to replace the Wallen tank. That Wallen tank's been leaking for years, and that unfortunately, it just goes to show the lack of the water district maintaining their stuff. I mean, it's been leaking, but did they provide a drain? The way that it drains now, it drains back onto the property instead of into the creek away from causing more damage to my property. That's not the issue. The issue is there's about 400 feet of gravel road above my paved road, the 500 feet of paved road that I put $25,000 into putting down, that they drive on not once a week, but every single day. We see them. They come up, they check that tank every day.
Twice a day.
There's, and my wife says sometimes twice. There's only one residence above, one house with 2 people that live in it that also use that road. They have an easement, both the water district and that homeowner has an easement on our paved road and the gravel road. It is incumbent upon someone that has an easement, it's case law and it's all over the place, that you're gonna maintain that road. They have not, Moody maintains, the landowner up above, he blades it with his wheel tractor as best he can. The only thing the water district has done is when they came out and they gave them better access to the water tank up there, they did tractor work up there to make that happen. When they did replace the water line in the top and the bottom, in the section from my end of my paved driveway up 200 feet, they replaced the water line. And it's funny that since they did that several years ago, that's when all the problem I've been having has happened since then, where I've had dirt and gravel washing down onto my expensive pavement, and then vehicles, their trucks driving over it every day. It's not helping the pavement at all. Now I realize that this section that you're talking about is out of this, is 200 feet further up my driveway. But my point is, why would I be for them? Because they're gonna put another 200 feet of water line in that section going to the new Wallen tank. Why would I feel confident about the work they're gonna do there in maintaining and doing a good job in maintaining it when they haven't to date? All the water that's coming down the hill, they say it's my fault for the work, the rock
Can you
wall.
wrap it up soon, sir?
I'm sorry. All right, thank you then.
No, it's okay. I apologize for cutting you off, but it's late, so I want to make sure we have a chance to have a discussion. Okay, thank you for that input. Is there anyone else on phone or Zoom wishing to comment on this item before we close public comment? Okay, seeing none, we will close public comment. I will offer the applicant the chance to come back up just to respond to that comment, if you wish, briefly. And if
It's a difference of opinion.
okay. All right, well, we'll ask you if we have any specific questions, then we'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission for further deliberation or questions of staff.
Think of staff. When we approve cannabis permits, we often require them to join road associations or to share in the cost of maintaining a road. Can we do that to a service district?
One of the things that's really important to draw a distinction in this particular case is that this is a general plan consistency determination. This is not a discretionary permit. So basically what we're finding is this is a public utility putting in a public facility, and that's consistent with the general plan. This is not a permit. So no, you can't put conditions on it.
It's not granting an entitlement.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, I can totally relate. I had to operate 7 water systems that you could drive a truck through, and I know getting the funding for that and the community benefit from your project outweighs anyone's concern. I think as a good neighbor and, you know, to get along with your neighbors, you should work out something aside from this and not just say, well, it's a difference of opinion. You know, it really can be for both of your benefit to have a good road and a sound road. And obviously the person who has concerns has put out financial outlay of $25,000. That's a lot for a homeowner to maintain the road, and you have paid staff that can assist in equipment, throughout the year. And even though it may not fit into this grant, any work right now, it should be something you should do as, good neighbors and want to do. I'm ready to make a motion. I think that to hold this project up would be, I want to hear from all of you, but to hold it up.
Yes, Director Ford.
Yeah, thanks. Everything I said was true. I just want to clarify one small point, is that there's also a special permit within this, but that's for the encroachment into the streamside management area, which is not near the wall and tank. So I just...
Okay. Yeah. Yes, Commissioner McFarland.
I was just going to add, I mostly support everything that was just stated with, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but being careful to not cross the line of gifting state funds, doing what's within the scope, and just so we recognize that.
Commissioner Scavdell?
And I appreciate what's been said too. I would say that the condition of this road and the erosion that's occurring in the runoff off of this road would be unacceptable for any other project that we would be approving at this commission. And I recognize that we're looking at just general plan conformance here. I also understand that there's going to be a new 4-inch water line that goes up this road, and that's going to require a trench right up the middle of this road, and after that it's going to have to be backfilled and compacted and regraded, and ideally it would be done in such a way that the water sheets off the side of the road and doesn't run back down the middle of the road or run back down the water line pipeline trench. So I'm sure that the engineers and the district will construct this in such a way that after that water line is installed, this road will look better than it does today.
Sure, you had but you have to come up to the mic if you're going to respond or answer a question.
I just would like to clarify I think that the area that Scott and the district are struggling with is not within the footprint of the project, because we absolutely are going to take care of that footprint and any damage that's outside of it. But there's this little section of road that, like he says, is 400 feet down from where we're talking about, that he wants us to come in and put a culvert into for him.
Right. No, I understand that.
So yeah, absolutely. In the
Understand
areas
that.
we're touching, it will be done well.
Yep. Okay.
Sure, and I'll just say too that I understand that the district is serves the public and is does not have excess cash. You've emphasized that point in your presentation. This is a public benefit that you're providing, and you have grant funds to do it. And I also take the point that this is not a discretionary permit in the way that we might attach conditions. So with all that being said, I don't think any of us want, including Mr. Carmichael, want to hold up this project. But it did seem to me that his case was made fairly persuasively. And I would urge you, even if there's no legal requirement as part of this decision, to find some way to help address his concerns in some way that's consistent with your grant and consistent with your budget. I personally would urge you to try to find a way to do that. Thank you. Yes, Commissioner West.
I'm going to move that we adopt staff's recommendation with the additional change to condition of approval number 3 to change the language to as applicable, as noted in the staff report.
I'll second that, and you're also included that other language of the conveyance.
Yes.
Okay, and with that, I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner West, seconded by Commissioner Mulder. Any further discussion of that before we vote? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, please say, or abstain? Okay, motion. There is a hand up, but that appeared just right at the end, and we closed public comment. So sorry, but we're past that point. Motion passes unanimously. But But before we actually adjourn, yes, Director Ford, do you have anything under report from planner?
Just give you a couple quick updates. The Board of Supervisors approved the short-term rental ordinance 30 days ago, which I think I reported last time we were together. And today was the first day that short-term rental applications started coming in. And actually fairly proud of the department's work. Developed a completely electronic process, a brand new work program within Excella to take that all in electronically. They started coming in at midnight last night. So that process is underway.
From what I hear, the website didn't crash.
How many applications did you get?
I don't know how many. We had 5 before the start of business today. So I don't know how many that actually came in today. And then the sign ordinance is going to the Board of Supervisors on Tuesday the 9th.
Okay, thanks. Any questions from commissioners? Yes.
I saw that you, if I remember right, released the, is it the public comment period opened for the environmental review for the McKinleyville Town Center project?
Yes, we issued the notice of preparation that we are preparing the EIR, and there will be a public meeting on that to take comments on April 16th, and that'll be at the Family Life Center in McKinleyville at 6 o'clock.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Through the chair.
Oh, yes.
I would also like to mention that we do have, I think, 4 new commissioners since the last time that we've given a training as the County Counsel's Office on Due Process, Brown Act, Public Records Act, and Planning Commissioner duties. And I think that it is about time that we refresh ourselves on those issues. So at some point in the near future, I would hope that we can set that on the agenda.
I would welcome that. Commissioner Mulder?
That reminds me, I know there's some training I'm supposed to take that I have not been contacted about. So while we're talking about trainings, I think there's like, maybe it was, I can't remember the name of it, but there was probably one training I think that I was supposed to take that I have not been contacted about.
Well, maybe we can make that a part of the training, is reminding us and helping direct us to the other resources for trainings that we may need to get. Thanks. Hey, Form 700s are due. You didn't turn them in.
For the training, will you like reach out to schedule, or will it be, how does that work?
The trainings are done during Planning Commission.
She means here in our meeting. So on a night when there's not an overloaded agenda, she'll take an hour or whatever it may be for a presentation. Yeah. Yeah. Are there any Planning Commission discussion items that commissioners wish to bring up? Yes, Commissioner Curriasi.
Yeah, I just wanted to notify that I will be missing the April 18th meeting due to traveling for work. So I will not be here.
Thank you. Anything else? Commissioner Scavdell.
I also will be missing Thomas's, Commissioner Muldar's first meeting as chair, so I also am traveling.
And I will be present, missing my son's baseball game.
Thank you. Okay, but we are still on for April 18th. I mean, there's agendized items. Or
The second meeting of the month we're reserving for long-range planning programs, so we're bringing 2 items forward for you to consider. One is the tiny home village allowance ordinance, and the second is we're experimenting with allowing more residential within commercial districts.
Okay, great. Sounds interesting. All right, well, if there's nothing else, then we can adjourn at 9:28. Thank you all.